Okay, shalom. Right, very interesting lesson, this lesson. It is a standalone lesson, but it is obviously connected to the last lesson that I did regarding Yosef's coffin. So this is Yosef's coffin in the Talmud and abstinence from wine. Some really incredible concepts come up in this. I'm going to do some lesson objectives because I want you to understand we are going to cover some really quite interesting stuff in this lesson. The first one being, we're going to analyse the concept of the two arks that travel together in the wilderness, Yosef's ark and the Ark of the Covenant, as mentioned in the Talmud, show how this highlights unity between the various concepts of Moshiach. Point 2, show how these two arks are linked to the concept and process of you shall circumcise the foreskin of your hearts, and how this is connected to general command to circumcise all males and the circumcision of Yosef, Yaakov and Abraham, and how these differed. Okay. 3, to look at extracts from the Zohar to link the concept of Yaakov being an ishtam, an innocent man, to Yosef and the concept of emeth, truth. 4, to show how Yeshua's words that he would abstain from wine are connected to him being Moshiach ben Yosef, and also indicate through the words of the sages why he had to abstain. Okay, so really interesting stuff. And then point 5, to link the two arks, two powerful battles between the forces of Satan and the wholly opposite forces of redemption and Moshiach, and the process through which that redemption from these satanic forces are attained. We're living in a time now where the satanic forces are incredibly powerful and unleashed, to the full maximum power. So obviously we have got to be aware of that, and we've also got to understand what is the wholly opposite and connect to those forces that are wholly and opposite, and turn from those influence and forces that are within that demonic satanic realm of influence. Okay, point 6, to directly link the verse in Talmud about the two arks to a revelation of Yeshua being the Mashiach. So there's some key texts involved in this, and to demonstrate through analysis that Edom must be governed prior to Moshiach ben David establishing Shalom. So there's a critical verse that this is all linked to, obviously, regarding Edom and King David. What had to happen in order for King David to enter into a time of Shalom. Right, let's just have so I just wanted to quickly read this. This is taken from the New Testament. I don't normally quote the New Testament, but when, like I've said in the past, the Talmud and the written Torah back up what is written, conceptually at least back up what is written, and through analysis we can determine this, then I've no problem in quoting things from the New Testament. I've got a problem in quoting things from the New Testament when it's contrary to what is actually written in the Torah. Okay, and sometimes this can happen. So he said to them, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. Truly I tell you, I will no longer drink of the fruit of the wine, or the fruit of the vine, that day when I drink it. I will no longer drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it anew in the kingdom of God." And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Okay, that hymn, by the way, is probably, it's either the Hallel or the Great Hallel 136. They're the sounds that you say after Pesach. Okay, so just thought I'd point that out because it's a nice little bit, of information. It's all interesting stuff where we're going in this lesson. So let's go and have a look now. So we said we were looking at the Talmud. This is taken from the Talmud, Sotah 13a. It's actually 13a. The Talmud is in pages, and when you get to the bottom of a page, it goes to the back page. So you've got 13a and 13b. Okay, so it's at the bottom of 13a, and it flips over onto the other page, and it's this. And all those years, so we're starting up here, and all those years that the Jewish people in the wilderness, these two arks, one a casket of a dead man, Joseph, and one the ark of the divine presence, and that word there is Shechina, or Shechina. Here look, Shel Shechina. Okay, the ark of the divine presence. And Shechina is the feminine aspect of divinity, if you like. that the aspect of the divine that fills all, and connected to the concept of the Holy Spirit and to the kingdom and definitely the concept of Moshiach. Okay, the last letter here of the name Yod He Vav He is the lower Shechina, and the first letter here is the upper Shechina, Bina and Malkuth. Right, so divine presence. The Ark of the Covenant were travelling. So the Ark of the divine presence. The Ark of the Covenant, that's what we're talking about. The Ark of the Covenant is the Ark of the divine presence. We're travelling together, and passers-by would say, what is the nature of these two arks? They said to them, one is of a dead person and one is of the divine presence. The passer-by would ask, and in what way is it the manner of a dead person to travel with the divine presence? They said in response, this one, i.e. the deceased Joseph, fulfilled all that is written in this. Therefore it is fitting that the two arks should lie side by side. So, okay, so this is taken from Sfaria.org, and the dark highlighted bits are what is actually written in Talmud, but Talmud is written in a very succinct way, and if you don't fill out the meaning, you would lose the meaning. Okay, if you're not aware of the way that the Talmud writes. Okay, so all these are just bits that fill out the obvious. Okay, so we've got mention of these two arks, right? There's loads of questions that come to my mind when I read that, because one, it's actually not all that clear given the Aramaic which is written in. Either of the arks in a way could be the divine presence, and either of the arks could be the one of the dead person. Why? Because we'll see later how you can rearrange those words to spell tam, and tam means innocent and perfect. Okay, so, and it's also linked to emet. We'll go see why later in the lesson. So there is a little bit of ambiguity, because obviously Yosef is filled in and things like that. But, generally the one that contains a dead man is the bones of Yosef. Okay, and the one with the divine presence would be the Ark of the Covenant with the tablets of the Ten Commandments written on. Okay, it's all very interesting stuff though, as we can see. So I had an inspiration, and I saw the word Shnei Aronoth, the two arks. So I did an analysis based on that. So we've got these two arks, and this is just phenomenal gematria. What it pulls up is wonderful stuff. So we might as well go and have a look, because obviously this is a big concept. These two arks were with the children of Israel in the entire time in the wilderness, and obviously they both went into Eretz Israel, and then Yosef was obviously buried in Shechem, which is northern Israel. And then the Ark of the Covenant was with them until they built the, eventually they built the actual temple, but there was temporary dwellings where, like at Shiloh, for example, temporary tabernacles built at Shiloh, okay, and other places as well. So two arks comes to 1023. We've got see over, we will see over. It's got an ordinal of 114, which is 2 times 57, 2 times Hamashiach, the ordinal of Hamashiach, and then it comes to 1137, those two added together, which is 3 times 417. 417 really significant number. All the numbers are significant, but so straight away we've got this. We've got the concept of Yonah filled, and we know, according to Yeshua, the only sign that would give a wicked and adulterous generation is the sign of Yonah. So Yonah comes up in every single revelation that there is within the Torah and the Talmud and all the stages of the writing, all the writings of the sages. Anywhere you look, you can possibly look for a revelation regarding Moshiach, specifically Moshiach ben Yosef. There will always be an indication of Yonah in there. It's without question, it's the most prevalent sign of all. It's the definite sign of Moshiach. So Yonah, for every reason why there's a link in so many, the entire concept of Yonah descending into the belly of the whale, and that being symbolic of our descent into death ultimately. But he also descended in the ship, didn't he? It went down into the bottom decks and he had to be woken up, and that's like us descending into this physical reality, our bodies, our soul descending into our bodies, and then from the ship he was descended down further into the belly of the whale, and that was called Sheol, like Sheol, the grave or hell or whatever, and that's obviously our descent further down into death itself. So there's all kinds of connections between Yosef, Moshiach ben Yosef, Yeshua, and the concept of Yonah. Every single thing you look at in the story of Yonah, gathering those from Nineveh who were non-Jewish to a place of repentance, and the king of Nineveh being, according to Midrash, linked to the Pharaoh of Exodus. All kinds of connections that are wonderful and marvellous. So Yonah filled where the Vav is filled with a Yud, which is the highest form of filling of the letter Vav. Vav can be filled three ways. So a Vav Vav, a Vav Yod Vav, and a Vav Aleph Vav. We will come across the Vav Aleph Vav later on because it's connected to the word Tam that I've already mentioned, innocent and perfect. Okay, so Yonah, we've got Yonah fill, the name Yonah, which means dove. He's got a regular of 71, ordinal of 35. They come to 106, which is 2 times 53, and 53 is Yeshua, the ordinal of Yeshua. Okay, and it's also Nun, as in Joshua ben Nun. Nun, the spelling out of Nun comes to 106. Okay, so this is the first filling out of Yonah. Each letter filled has its sound. So the Yud, Vav, Nun here of Yonah. Yonah comes to 158 plus 86, and that's the gematria of Elohim, God. Together added up, they come to 330, which is 3 times the ordinal of Yeshua HaMashiach. So we've got 2 times the ordinal of Yeshua, 3 times the ordinal of Yeshua HaMashiach, and that also, where we already had a Mashiach, didn't we? HaMashiach there, 2 times HaMashiach. That's 2 times 57. Right, so then the second filling out of Yonah. So each of these letters filled again comes to 794 regular plus 254 ordinally. Together they come to 1048, which is, I need to take that off, it's 8 times 131. Okay, 8 times 131, really significant messianic number, because 3 times that is 393, which is the regular of HaMoshiach, but it's also the umbrella, it's also the number to signify the unity of all aspects of the Meshiachim. So 393 comes up all the time, and obviously 3 times 131 is 393. It comes up all the time. It's the gematria of Shiloh, the regular and ordinal of Shiloh. It's the gematria of the line of Yehuda. There's just so many that it's connected to. It's unbelievable. It's a very, very powerful connection that's connected to 131. However, if we add up all the regulars, the regular of the spelling of Yonah, the regular of the first filling of Yonah, and the regular of the second filling of Yonah, it comes to 1023, the 2 arks. Okay, and ultimately we're trying to get to this bird of redemption that is a bird, the dove, where the body of the bird is Moshe, the right wing of the bird is Mashiach ben David, and the left wing is Mashiach ben Yosef, and together that is the bird of redemption, and together they are the united concepts of the Mashiach, the soul of Mashiach, incarnated first in Moshe, and then he came back at the highest level of the soul of Mashiach in the life of Yeshua, and he will be coming back again. The soul of Mashiach will come back again as Mashiach ben David. So there you've got the bird of redemption. These are the concepts that we need to connect to. Now, This, by the way, 1,398 is 6 times 233. 233 is a very, very important number again. But the main important thing that represents is Etz Chaim, the tree of life. And that's the kind of consciousness that we're wanting to get back to, where we're totally and utterly aware of the tree of life, which is the name YHVH. And the Moshiach is the gate through which we access the name YHVH, face to face. Face to face, not back to back. Okay, so there's lots of people that are in a relationship with the name YHVH or peeping through the cracks at a revelation of the name YHVH, but there's a lot of concealment still involved when we're talking about a fully revealed face-to-face relationship with the name YHVH with no more concealment that is accessed through the Moshiach. Okay, so going back to this number 417, we've got the word Adam. And the sages say that Adam is made up. It's obviously Adam, Aleph, Daleth, Mem, right? And that stands for Adam, David, Moshiach. So the Aleph is Adam, the Daleth is David, or Dawid, and the Mem is Moshiach. That also comes to 417. So we've got straight away this unity again, a unity. Because Moshiach will be the last Adam, it will be elevated back up, through a resurrection of the dead. Adam has fallen and suffers death as a consequence of eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and becoming conscious of both good and evil, as opposed to the tree of life consciousness. And as a consequence, there's a death involved in that. The last Adam is us rectified, resurrected back from the dead. All aspects of humanity, that's primarily done through the concept of Moshiach. That resurrection is experienced through Moshiach, and we are going to get elevated up to the last Adam, which is Moshiach ben David. Okay, and then we've got the fact that 417 is 3 times Yonah Hanavi. Okay. And it's also connected to Chanuk, which is Metatron. And I've pointed out this Chanuk was transformed. He was no more, it says. He walked with God and then he was no more. I.e. he did not die. He was transformed into an angelic being, and that angelic being that he was transformed in, according to Jewish teachings, is Metatron. And now Metatron is like the prince of the world. He's governing the entire floor between heaven and earth. And I pointed out in my teaching called Metatron, that Metatron's in place whilst Yosef is in a state where he is perceived of as dead. The true channel between heaven and earth is Yosef, Yesod. He should be there, but when he's in a state where Yaakov, his father, that represents heaven, Tifereth, heaven, when Yaakov, his father, is not conscious of Yosef being alive, then in place of that channel is a very diminished flow, if you like. There should be an abundant flow based on Yaakov perceiving the truth. There should be an abundant flow between heaven and earth. But when Yaakov, that represents heaven, is in a state of mourning over Yosef, and his strength has departed from him. He's no longer got the Ruach HaKodesh. He's no longer in possession of the truth. He's in a very diminished state, and this channel between heaven and earth is very much diminished. It's like, Yesod really is the male part is symbolized by the male anatomy. There's 2 states that the male anatomy can be in. One's very much alive, and one's very much, in a state, what's called a state of death, where it's I hope you can use your imagination and fill that in. I don't want to go into specifics there, but there's a state of the male anatomy that's very upright, and there's one that's very wimpy, if you like, or not erect. So Metatron really is, and that's symbolic of Yosef now. Yosef should be filled and full of life, and he should be in the channel between heaven and earth that allows all the flow and abundance from heaven to come down to earth. But when the truth is not there regarding Yosef, like Od Yosef Chai, we got Metatron there instead. Now Metatron was formerly Enoch, so you can understand the connection there. And you can see why there's a powerful connection therefore between Enoch and the concept of Yonah Hanavi. Okay, because Yonah Hanavi is the prophet that ultimately reveals that truth, Od Yosef Chai, and takes us from a state of metatronic consciousness into face-to-face tree of life consciousness with the name YHVH, where the true channel between heaven and earth is fully established, i.e. Moshiach ben Yosef, who was Yeshua, who was Moshe, the soul of Moshiach, incarnated originally as Moshe. That's why he's a prophet like Moshe. A prophet like me, it's actually written, but it's obviously talking about Moshe. And they are all connected. They're all connected. You know, we're waiting to remove that metatronic flow and but restriction, and that brings us to a consciousness of good and evil, to a true flow that's linked to very much a that true channel that's very much linked to like an awareness of the name YHVH fully face to face through the concept of the Moshiach, fully revealed to us, that brings us to that tree of life reality and elevates us back up to our status in Gan Eden. It's all wonderful and glorious. Right, just some other numbers to look, because as if you saw on there, for example, it said see over and see over. I want to go and have a look at this, because obviously these two arks have got a lot to tell us. Right, because on the last statement we know that the sea split on account of seeing the ark of Yosef. Okay, and I've got all kinds of analysis that I did regarding that particular statement, the sea saw it and fled. I did a full analysis of Psalm, I think it's 114, and it's absolutely glorious. We're not going to go through it today, but it highlighted to me there's something very significant about these two arks. We really need to do a deep dive into that, which is what I'm doing now, numerically diving down deep and trying to weave together some of the concepts that this brings up for us, and some of the unity that we can see established through this concept of the two arks. Okay, so it's obviously very fundamental, because why? Because one contained the Torah of Moshe and one contains the Torah of Mashiach, and these need uniting as one in order to reveal Mashiach ben David, who we are long awaiting for, because we want to get to that stage of final Adam. We want to be elevated back up to the status of Gan Eden and even higher, and we want to attach to the tree of life reality, and we don't want there to be any more death and concealment. We want there to be a resurrection from the dead, and we want there to be revelation, a revelation of the name YHVH, and that divine flow from above to below fully opened up for the sake of his name to be revealed and for the benefit of all creation. Right, so let's have a further look. So we've said we'd look over to 1023. I think we're going to be looking at this number now, because that's what's highlighted. Right, yeah. Right, so this is a really, really significant concept. In every single Mezuzah, there's a mysterious word written on the Mezuzah, and that mysterious word is this here. It's unpronounceable. Okay, but it's basically a cipher for the name YHVH Eloheinu YHVH, which is taken from the Shema Yisrael Adonai, and this represents Adonai. Let me just get my cursor there. The Kaf Vav Zayin Vav represents YHVH, because this is a cipher where for each letter of the word YHVH, the name YHVH, you move one place forward in the Aleph Bet. So instead of a yod, you've got a chaf, the next letter along. Instead of a he, you've got a vav, the next letter along from a he. Instead of a vav, which would be there, you've got a zayin, the next letter along. And then a he, instead of a he, you've got a vav again. So you've got this word representing yod, he, vav, he, but one letter ahead. And then this is representing Eloheinu, but it's one letter ahead. So instead of an aleph, you've got a beth. Instead of a lameth, a mem, etc., etc. Instead of a he, a vav. And it goes, so you've got from Shema Adonai, so Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Okay? You've got these three words then, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai. Okay, they come to 114. Right? That's the ordinal. The regular of them is 213. And then that gives us 327. Okay? Like I've already pointed out, 114 is 2 times 57, which is 2 times HaMoshiach. Whichever way you look at this is pointing towards Moshiach. And we've got these concepts of the two arks that are in unity with each other. The ark of Moshe and the ark that represents the Torah of Moshe, and the ark that represents the Torah of Moshiach, the bones of Yosef, which represents the Torah of Moshiach. The essence of Yosef is the Torah of Moshiach. And bones means essence, okay? So I just wanted to point this out because ultimately, like I keep saying, the Moshiach is a gate to bringing us into that face-to-face relationship with the name YHVH, turning us from a back-to-back relationship or a back-to-front relationship or whatever level of relationship that obscures in some way or conceals in some way the name YHVH from being fully revealed to us. So the Moshiach is to bring us completely out of a place of concealment into a complete place of revelation of the name YHVH, and that is revealed. The Shema really is a revelation of that, because we're wanting to get to a place of knowing that YHVH is Echad, one, and that oneness is to know that He is sovereign and there's no other force other than Him, that even despite the evil that we have witnessed, it was only by the will of YHVH that came into being, and that there's a purpose in that and a meaning of that to ultimately be transformed in order to reveal that there's only YHVH and nothing else beside Him. Okay, and I pointed out in last lesson the word Echad is made up of Aleph, Chai, Chet, Daleth, and that stands for Adam, the Aleph. Chaya is Eve rectified, so that's the Chet, the second letter of Echad, and Daleth is David. So Adam, Chaya, David. So you've got the male aspect of divinity, the female aspect of divinity, heaven and earth, and then you've got the Moshiach who brings shalom and unity between those. So we've got heaven and earth unified, male and female unified, Yaakov and Esav unified, sun and moon unified, physicality spiritually unified, Israel and the nations unified. It's all about the unity between the female and the male aspect of divinity, and Moshiach ben Yosef is that channel between. Or the entire concept of Moshiach ultimately is that part of that whole channel that brings unity between the male and female. 327 then is Moshiach ben David ordinally, Moshiach ben Yosef ordinally, and Moshiach ben Ephraim ordinally. Add them together, 327. So we have got to be able to understand that containing this concept of these two arks is everything that we need to know regarding that whole unity that's needed, that whole gate that's needed. Oh yeah, back to that. This is what's written in the Mezuzah. Where do you put the Mezuzah? On the gate. You put it on the doorposts and on the gates. So again, we've got that concept of the gate and the Mashiach being connected to this gate that we've got to pass through in order to enter into true divine consciousness of the name YHVH. Okay, I think I've covered everything there. Right, this is the day that YHVH has made. So obviously this is talking about when we finally enter into final redemption. Okay, look at this number here, 474, is Da'ath. knowledge. It's also Erev Rav, okay, which prevents us from accessing divine knowledge. And usually, if you haven't got, I've done teachings on this before, the whole concept of Moshiach is basically at the level of our supernal da'ath, right? And through that, then we're able to access the name Yod He Vav He at the higher levels, and plus the to be. Da'ath is the unity between the male wisdom and the female understanding as well. So there's all kinds of things like that involved there. But we've really got to restore our da'ath, because this is what has been damaged when we've eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's brought about this consciousness, this duality and things like that. We've got to restore our supernal da'ath, if you like. And this is really achieved through the concept of the Moshiach, which represents that supernal da'ath. If we haven't got the Moshiach at that level, we will have a serpent there instead. Okay, or we will have some kind of half truth and half serpent kind of mentality, and sometimes we'll be able to perceive Yod He Vav He and sometimes not. We're still in a place of where there's revelation and concealment. We're not face to face with the truth that there's only Yod He Vav, nothing else beside him. We've still got this, well, sometimes we can perceive Yod He Vav, and sometimes we're overwhelmed by all the evil that we're able to perceive, okay? So we need to correct our knowledge, our supernal da'ath, our supernal knowledge, in order to connect to that face-to-face revelation that there's only Yod He Vav and nothing else beside him. This whole tree of knowledge experience, the tree of life experience. So that's there. That also comes to 114, so we can see that connection there. I think I've gone on about that enough. Okay, bones of Moses, Atzmuth Moshe. Right, so, okay, but the bones of Moses is not to be found within the Torah. Okay, it's just a concept that we can learn from Yosef, because obviously Moses was buried in a place nobody knows where exactly he was buried. He was buried in Moab, the mountains of Moab, but we don't know exactly where he was buried. And the only mention regarding this is in the New Testament, in the book of Jude, but it mentions is the body of Moses. Okay, so I worked this out because we get told about the Atzmuth Yosef. They are definitely mentioned in Torah, the bones of Yosef. So I just, instead of Atzmuth Yosef, I did Atzmuth Moshe, and I worked out what that would be. It comes to 951, regular 114, ordinally. So we can see that linked up to some major concepts. Okay, so even though it's not mentioned explicitly in the Torah, the bones of Moses, we can assume that the bones of Moses are buried somewhere in Moab. Okay, just as Moshe's bones were buried in and then ultimately needed retrieving from the place in which they were buried, and that is why they've ended up with the two arks in the wilderness, and that is why Moshe was the one who took responsibility for the ark. Okay, I hope you're with me with that one. So again, 2 times HaMoshiach, but also connected to all these concepts, which is hardly surprising. And then we've also got 951 is 3 times 317, which is very powerfully linked to Moshe anyway. And then we've got for dogs have surrounded me. Okay, so this is part of the prophecy. I know this has been heavily related to Yeshua HaMoshiach, Jesus the Messiah. But as we can see, we've got the ordinal. This is the Mispar Gadol. So this is the regular and the ordinal. And that ordinal there, 118, is a very, very significant filling out of the name Yeshua. So when Yeshua is filled out, every letter as it sounds, where the Vav is filled with an Aleph, okay, when the Vav is filled with an Aleph, it comes to 118. I might flick that up actually. And then, but also the Mispar Gadol, comes to 100, and the Mispah Gadol ordinal. Mispah Gadol is when we have to take into consideration the change of the form of the letter M or the end, or the Sophete letters. So there's 5 Sophete letters that change form when they're on the end of a letter, and when they change form we can give them another number, and they can get the regular number because they are that, like this one's a letter M. We can give it the regular and the ordinal numbers, but we can also give them what's called the Mispah Gadol numbers. So that's the Mispah Gadol, the regular of the Mispah Gadols, and the ordinal of the Mispah Gadol numbers, the big number in, taking into consideration that the Mem is a Sophete letter. Right, so that comes to 129, and if we look up here, we can see that's also the ordinal of Moshiach ben Ephraim. So wherever you look, there's all these very powerful messianic connections, and like I say, that's also linked up to the bones of Moses. So there's a unity always between Yeshua and Moshe. Every single aspect of Yeshua's life is a reflection of what's happened in Moshe's life. You know, he revealed the name YHVH, and he had to descend into an horrific Erev Rav exile. Moshiach ben Yosef revealed the name of YHVH at the higher level of Keter, the higher level of mercy, the more inner dimension to the name YHVH, but then he had to go into a very dark exile like what we're in now, the Edomite Greco-Roman exile, and suffer in that until we retrieve that revelation from below to above. Okay, till we do the work below to reveal that truth that has descended into this exile. Okay, so it's all linked. So we can always see that we can see how for everything to do with Moshe, there's a revelation also to do with Yeshua. You know, there's always a connection. And we've got this, look, the serpent, if you go to the squared regular, it's 317 times 292. So Yeshua and Moshe are connected to this number here, 317. I'll tell you why, because Yeshu, which is the derogatory name of Yeshua, is 316. If you add a Kalel to that, representing YHVH, Alufo Shel Olam, it comes to 317. Okay, and the word Vayikra, it's also connected to this as well. We'll go through the process of going through this. This is the word Vayikra from the opening of the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, right? And in the book is a small aleph, and that small aleph represents Moshe, but he's humbled himself, so it's written much smaller than it should be within the actual Torah scroll, and that small aleph of Vayikra is the sages say is symbolic of the humility or humbleness of Moshe, who didn't want to put, and God called to Moshe, he didn't want to put that, so he diminished himself in this small letter aleph. But actually Moshe is also called the Aleph HaGadol, the big aleph, the aleph that is 1,000. You've got like the Mispah Gadol of the aleph is 1,000, the big numbering of the aleph is 1,000. So that's connected to Moshiach, because obviously Moshiach ben David, which is 434, and Moshiach ben Yosef, which is 566, add together and they equal 1,000. And then you've got this whole concept of the 1,000 lights of Bina. You've got the whole concept of which were the lights that shone on Moshe's face, and all kinds of things, you know, that would connect Moshe to the Aleph. Okay, so I think also Yeshua is, one of the fillings out of Yeshua is 373. I might just go find that along with this 118. Just wait a minute. Okay, so I've now pulled out the Yeshua filled that's linked to this for dogs have surrounded me. So now you can see there's a definite link between Yeshua and Moshe and the whole concept of Moshiach ben Ephraim. Okay. I've just pulled out some numbers for this 373 as well, because you can see that this is highly messianic, you know, and the whole concept of Moshiach being diminished, you know, there's Yeshua with his name erased, and there's Moshe diminished in exile like the little aleph, that is in the Torah scroll, until the status where they're fully revealed. Then Moshe becomes the Aleph Gadol, and Yeshua has got the honour that he deserves, not this horrendous curse, and that is called at this time Yeshua with his name erased. Okay, so we've got this concept as well, Timnath Sarach. This is where Joshua ben Nun is buried. That comes to, it's got an ordinal of 71, so Timnath is 71, which is Yonah, and Sarach is 43, which is Esav. The words Sarach is related to the name Sarach bat Asher. They're not spelt the same, because one's spelt with Samach, one's spelt with a Shin. Okay, but the rabbis do say that this is the source of her name, Sarach, because Sarach can also is the term used for the excess or the overhanging excess curtain in the Mishkan in the wilderness, the tabernacle in the wilderness. It had a curtain, and it was overhanging, and the overhanging is related to this word Tisrach. Okay, so they say because Sarach bat Asher lived such a long time, she is related to this concept of the overhanging excess curtain, because she lived excessively. Sarach bat Asher was the woman who found the bones of Yosef with Moshe. So she's one of the aspects of one of the 5 aspects of salvation that come up continuously in terms of revelation of Moshiach, the concept of Moshiach. So they come to 114 together, and ultimately 43 represents Esav. It's the ordinal of Esav, and we're trying to bring peace between body and soul. So Esav represents our body, Esav represents the feminine, Yaakov represents the masculine, Yaakov represents Israel, Esav represents the nations. We want peace between body and soul. We want peace between heaven and earth. We want that flow to be the flow that is Moshiach, the channel that is Moshiach in between heaven and earth, to be fully opened and fully revealed to us, and to give us full access to the name YHVH, and to be no concealment at all. So we've got to transform earth into a dwelling place for YHVH. We've got to take Esav and transform him, transform the evil into shalom. I go over that concept a lot, and obviously the dove is part of that process, because the dove represents shalom. For my name is within him. This is Metatron. This is the angel of YHVH, and this sages say that is Metatron. Okay, and he's sometimes known as the lesser YHVH, because much of our experience of YHVH in exile is what we usually experience, what we usually perceive that we're experiencing as YHVH is more likely to be the angel of YHVH, Metatron, because most of our experience of YHVH is in a constant state of change. If we do this and if we're good, he loves us, and if we do this and if we're not, we do bad, he punishes us, and that changes our understanding of YHVH from being somebody who's a source of our blessing to somebody who's a source of all our curses and our wars and stuff like that. YHVH changes not. So he doesn't change in that way. He's always good, always merciful, always kind. And if we can't perceive the unchanging nature of YHVH, then we've got something there instead representing him in a way that's actually not the truth. And that representation of YHVH is somebody that changes depending on whether we behave a certain way or not, which is not the truth. He changes not. Our perception of YHVH in this way is tree of knowledge consciousness. Sometimes, if we do good, YHVH does good to us, and if we don't, it does. That's the knowledge of the tree of the good and the evil that we've got to overcome in some way in order to gain access to the unchanging reality and truth of YHVH, that is always good, is always merciful, is always kind. He never ever changes. Okay, so we usually, when we talk about God and the Lord, we more or less speaking about Metatron, who's been put in charge until we reach that place of revelation where Od Yosef Chai. Yosef is still alive, and we are fully conscious of the concept of Moshiach and what YHVH has done in order to reveal that concept of Moshiach to us, and through that light of Moshiach, specifically Moshiach ben Yosef, but only when he's united with all the other concepts of Moshiach, Moshe and Moshiach ben David, can we see the light of the name YHVH face to face. That is the gate through which we gain that access. As you can see here, again, Moshiach. And not only that, the squared ordinal for my name is within him is 1736, which is 4 times Moshiach ben Yosef, Moshiach ben David. So Metatron is like Metatron is there instead of the concept of the Moshiach, the united concept of the Moshiach. He's there instead. He's the channel in there instead. It doesn't bring us into a face-to-face relationship with the name YHVH. Okay, it doesn't, because it brings us into a consciousness where YHVH changes depending on our actions. So 804, which is related to the concept of, we won't go there, sorry, 804, and we've got 402 down here, which is Yeshua filled out, where the Vav is filled with a Yud. Okay. It's got 87 ordinal for that, and together they come to 489. And this is where I get the unity again. For my name is within him. You've got Metatron instead of having the unity of the Meshachim. Okay, so we've even all the concept of Moshiach ben Yosef suffering with us in exile, Moshe suffering with us in exile diminished. It's all part of the glorious concept of Moshiach. It all needs to be united together as one. Okay, even the fact that YHVH willed for the Moshiach to descend in order to give us a work to do to reveal the truth regarding the concept of Moshiach. So descended into exile, to Erev Rav exile mentality, Greco-Roman exile mentality, Yishmaelite exile mentality. We've got to access our Hebrew mentality, because Hebrew is synonymous with truthful mentality, pure mentality, where we're able to discern true reality, i.e. the name YHVH, rather than the YHVH sometimes revealed and sometimes concealed. So obviously Metatron is instead of the concept of Moshiach. Even the fact that Yeshua is diminished, suffering with us in exile by the will of YHVH, and Moshe suffering in exile with us by the will of YHVH, until we complete our work below, okay, our 999 footsteps of Moshiach ben Yosef. So we can see Moshe spelt like this, where the He is filled with a Yud and the Vav is filled with an Aleph, and I think that's the level of Bina. If you add those two together, 455 and 523 goes to 978, which is 2 times 489. So we can see the link. Moshe, Yeshua, Moshiach ben Yosef, diminished, suffering in a state of, where Metatron's there instead of this wonderful, glorious channel that is Moshiach ben Yosef, united with all the other Meshachim, opens up the floor between heaven and earth and brings us into a full face-to-face relationship. Okay, major concepts, by the way. These are all major concepts. Until the king's wine cellar. This is taken from it's really fascinating verse, actually. It's fascinating that it's in here, because we will be talking about Yosef abstaining from wine. All the time when he was in exile, he abstained from wine. Even the Torah indicates this. Okay, so until the king's wine cellar, this will ultimately be the wine that will be drunk once the kingdom of God's established here down on earth as it is in heaven. And that will be through the concept of Moshiach, when we've finally completed all we can to reveal the truth regarding Moshiach, that reveals the truth regarding the name YHVH. Then we can drink the wine that is preserved in its skin since the 6 days of creation, which is all code name for Moshiach ben Yosef, because from the 6 days of creation, the initial letters, Meshesheth, Bereshith, or Yeshesheth, Yomim, Bereshith, I think it's something like that. The initial letters of that are the same initial letters for Moshiach ben Yosef. So it's all this glorious concept united as one. Here we've got the 391 that I spoke about earlier, 393 that I spoke about earlier, the 3 times 300 and 131. So 393 is 3 times 131, and that was what I said, and this is exactly the same as Moshiach. The regular of Moshiach is 393, and it's also the concept of, oh no, it's not the regular of that. It's a concept. It's the Shiloh, the umbrella term for the Moshiach that unites all the 5 aspects of Moshiach together. Moshiach ben Yosef, Moshiach ben David, Moshe, Yaakov and Sarach bat Asher. And they're the 5 aspects of the name Yod He Vav He, the tip of the Yod, the body of the Yod, the first He, the Vav and the final He. They're the 5 aspects of Moshiach. They're connected to the 5 books of Torah, the 5 worlds, the 5 levels of soul, the 5 books of Psalms, etc., etc. Okay? And Shiloh is 345, exactly the same as Moshe, and it's an ordinal of 48, which is the exact same ordinal of Yosef. Added together, they come to 393. Okay, and then, but that 393, like I say, it connects them all. I go through that a lot. I'm not going to go through it today, but just to point out that we come across the concept of wine later in the teaching, so just to bear that in mind. Until the king's wine cellar, this is a prophecy. Let me just try and find the verse actually. Okay, so this is the actual verse, extremely important verse. I did a full analysis of this. It says, the whole earth shall be changed to be like a plain from the hill of Rimmon, which means pomegranate, in the south of Jerusalem, but Jerusalem, will be elevated high and remain in its old place. That word remain, it comes up later in the analysis. From the gate of Benjamin to the place of the first gate until the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananel until the king's wine cellar. Okay, so there's a couple of really interesting stuff to point out. The ordinal of this whole verse is 5 times 233, and as I've pointed out, 233 is Eitz Chaim, the tree of life. Okay, but this is what's really interesting. Ad Sha'ar Ha-Pinim, until the corner gate, because Sha'ar Ha-Panim, going back to that concept of Metatron, Sha'ar Ha-Panim, Metatron is called Sa'ar Ha-Panim, Sa'ar Ha-Panim, prince of the faces. Okay, and as we can see here, is actually called Metatron Sar HaPanim, and the initial letters of Metatron Sar HaPanim are Moshe. So he's instead of Moshe, he was the Moshiach, right? But he's called Sar HaPanim, and this is Sha'ar HaPanim, the corner gate, instead of the prince of the faces. This is the corner gate, or the gate of the faces. Hapanim can actually mean faces, the faces. So until the gate of the corner, right? And the only difference between Sarapanim and Sharapanim is the letter Ayin. What's missing out of Yeshua's name is the letter Ayin. Okay, so somehow, until we get that truth regarding Moshiach ben Yosef, until we take him from a place of curse and you've got to erase his memory. So he's in a state of curse where his memory is erased, with his name erased. And once we've got to elevate him with the truth, the revelation, what is revealed in Torah, the unity of Moshiach ben Yosef and Moshe together as one, we've got Metatron there instead. Like I've said, we've got this restricted flow between heaven and earth. So Moshiach is the one that opens up that flow. So we've got to go from Sarapanim, who is like the prince of the faces, or the prince of the corner gate, the prince of the faces, for example, that's there instead of Moshe and instead of Moshiach ben Yosef. We've got to take that letter Ayin and put it into the word Sa'ar to make the word Sha'ar. we've got to take that concept of the prince of the faces and turn it instead into a gate of the faces, like a messianic gate, where we're then able to access the tree of life. You know, a face-to-face relationship with the tree of life, and that number there is the tree of life, and 5 times anything is that rectified. So a fully rectified concept of the tree of life, which is the name YHVH, accessed through transforming this Metatronic reality, where sometimes we're able to see YHVH clearly, and then sometimes it's very concealed, or we're peeping through the cracks of exile. We want to transform that reality. We want there to be the truth there instead, the truth that Od Yosef Chai, Yosef is still alive, and all the unification of the concept of Mashiachim, and with the Moshiach with his name not erased, i.e. he's got the ayin of his letter name, and that ayin of his letter name is inserted within this concept of Metatron, if you like, in order to transform this prince that blocks us from accessing the tree of life, this prince of the faces that blocks us from that reality. We're stuck with a tree of knowledge, sometimes good, sometimes bad mentality. We've got to turn that prince that blocks our way, that metatronic reality that blocks our way to the tree of life. We've got to insert that with the truth, the missing letter ayin from Moshiach ben Yosef's name, turn it into a gate, and through that gate, like I've said, through which we access the divine consciousness of the name YHVH, and we're able to cling to the tree of life. So there's all kinds of incredible connections that you're able to make, and like I say, we'll be making until the king's wine cellars. We come towards that because we're going to be looking at this whole concept of wine within this actual teaching. So let me just go back now. Right, okay, so I think we got to here. So again, we've got this 393. I'll point out that because that actually does come up when we're talking about, when we look at what's written in the Talmud about Yosef abstaining from the wine. It comes up a lot. It's very significant. I wasn't going to go through the numbers 393, and I'm not going to go through them now, but when I come to the next time we come up to it, I think what I'll do is I'll go through the slide that contains all those connections to the concept of Moshiach. It's obviously so important, and the more I'm having a look at this, the more I'm seeing how relevant it actually is. That 885, by the way, is 5 times 177, I think. Yeah, it is 5 times 177. This number in itself is it's related to Yosef. It's actually the bones of Yosef. The more I see it, the more I'm getting all these connections, and it's the horn of salvation as well. But it's 5 times 177, and 177 is Gan Eden. So there's lots and lots in there, and then the 102 is Emunah, and we are in a place of rectifying our faith in the name YHVH, and there's 2 main concepts that we're actually rectifying. One, rectifying our faith in the concept of Moshiach, in the coming of Moshiach, I should say, and then 1 in the resurrection of the dead. And the last lesson I did about Yosef's coffin, I talked about the concept of the resurrection of the dead. It's absolutely incredible. But like I say, that number there, I've just noticed it. I was looking at the 114, but that is 5 times 177, Gan Eden. And it's also the bones of Yosef, I do believe, and the horn of salvation. I'll probably just flick them up now as well. Okay, so there you go, look. You've got 885 is to the rock of our salvation. That's Yeshenu, which obviously contains the same letters as Yeshua as well, and an additional nun for our. And then you've got Atzmut Yosef, bones of Yosef, and they've got exactly the same gematria, 762 plus 123, and 123 is Kates Shem Lechoshech, the ordinal of that. He sets an end to darkness. We will be coming across that concept as well. So we can see, the more you dive into these things, the more they start to, everything's linked to everything else. All these major concepts are all linked, and it's all utterly and absolutely glorious. Let's see if I can go. Right, I'll just have to go back. Right, so next one then. So Metatron. So this is when there's 2 ways of spelling Metatron. Okay, there's one, it's mem tet tet resh vav nun, and then there are some instances when it's spelt with Metatron, and according to the sages, these are actually two different angels, or somewhere like that. They are actually different. So obviously with the Yod, this is a higher level of revelation than Metatron. Okay, so where's the connection? Let me just have a look. That's what I said. I said I'd have a look at this Vayikra, because it's so important. Obviously, it's connected to all these concepts that we've had a look at. The bones of Yosef, dogs have surrounded me, i.e. in exile. The concept of Moshiach is very, very hidden and erased and diminished. It's concept of Nachash. So like I said, instead of the Moshiach there, in exile we've got usually a Nachash at the seat of our consciousness, which is our Da'ath, our knowledge that has been corrupted because we've eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and all them concepts that I was talking about. So the 373 is connected to Metatron. Okay, so like I say, instead of Moshe elevated up as a big Aleph, is diminished in exile, hidden within the husks of the Erev Rav, and it's our job to toil to reveal the truth regarding Moshiach and the unity of the Meshachim. Right, so that's obviously related to Metatron. Like I say, he is there instead of the truth regarding Moshiach ben Yosef. Okay, so Yosef made himself known. As we can see, this is where we want him to get to. We want him to get to that place of revelation where we've got Yosef there, Od Yosef Chai, rather than the substitute for Yosef. Yosef was a substitute. Yosef was a substitute. He made himself a substitute, and then instead of Yosef, we have Metatron, who is Yosef's substitute. Okay, so we need to get Yosef back to where he should be. Od Yosef Chai, Yosef is still alive, and get rid of Metatron that stands in his place until that truth is fully revealed. So 746 is obviously 2 times 373, all connected. We're waiting for the day. Shmot, the book of names. Okay, and this here even is Tachath instead of. That's the word for the substitute. So Tachath Beno is instead of his son. Okay, and it's also, Yosef mentioned the words Amai instead of Elohim to his brothers when his brothers were frightened of what they might do when the father passed away. He says, Amai Hatahath, Amai instead, I may a substitute for God, I may in place of God, and that was the word Tachath. It's also connected to Abraham, the Mispah Gadol of Abraham. When Abraham, the Mem is 600, on the last letter of Abraham is 600 instead of 40. That also comes to 808. So also, all kinds of wonderful connections just there. And obviously the story of Shemot is the entire exodus from Egypt. You know, it's the entire Exodus. It's what contains the first redemption. It's also what contains the last redemption. Okay, the book that contains that. So 746 is 2 times 373, and that's very much related to Erev Rav, which is what conceals Moshe, the Moshiach. I've put there Avraham, look, the Mispah Gadol of Abraham's 808. So also related here, look. What I saw, look, Taneth Pasim, and he made him a fine woolen coat. This is talking about the Ketaneth Pasim. It's really a coat of many colours. Okay, so the Mispah Gadol, when we take into consideration the Mem again, being a Sophite letter, the ordinal of that is 201, which is let there be light. God said let there be light, and there was light. The ordinal of that verse, and God said let there be light, and there was light, is 201. But together with the Mispah Gadol regular and ordinal comes to 2,238, which is 2 times 1,119, which is 6 times 373. So linked to all that. Well, we know that it's linked to all that. Why? Because this was the start of the problem. the jealousy between the brothers that caused them to sell Yosef into slavery, that caused them to put him into exile, caused him to be diminished. Okay, it's the jealousy. It wasn't just that, but this is when I mentioned about them connected to circumcision. Obviously, we can see there's a connection to Abraham through this concept, which is a major concept, techath. Like I said, it's exactly the same as techath, as in techath beno. Instead of his son, instead of Yitzchak, it was Moshiach ben Yosef that was sacrificed. But tamim is the word for innocent, and this is regarding Abraham. Abraham is called tamim, but it's really only one layer of circumcision. There's two layers of circumcision. There's the orla, and then there's the priya, the inner membrane. Okay, both need to be circumcised in order for circumcision to be valid. Abraham represented the outer circumcision, and he was called tamim as a result. But the mispar gadol of tamim is 1119, so we can see how it's related to circumcision. The ultimate circumcision is circumcision of our hearts. You got to have your arrogance and your pride circumcised from your hearts in order to receive the truth regarding Moshiach. Why? Because we've been told a lot of lies that we actually identify with, and a lot of lies that we inflame our egos with, like we are the supreme race in this world, and it doesn't matter whether it's Jews that believe that, Christians that believe that, or Muslims believe that. This needs circumcising from your heart, because it's absolute stupidity. Yod YHVH is interested in all human beings being elevated up, because in Mashiach ben David there's going to be shalom. So we are all to play a part of equal importance. We've all got different roles to play in the final redemption and the final elevation of Adam back up to his status in Gan Eden. There is distinctions to be made, okay, but to think that we are somehow superior than another human being, it just goes to show how little awareness we have of the name Yod YHVH, because our righteousness compared to his righteousness is nothing. And it's about becoming more conscious of Yod YHVH, not conscious of ourselves. Conscious of ourselves leads to judgment. It leads to death, because it leads to a very small perspective where we're not able to access those divine realities, that divine truth, the name Yod YHVH, the expansive consciousness. We're just stuck in exile, we're stuck in Mitzrayim, we're stuck in this little version of reality that puts ourselves at the centre of the universe instead of the name Yod YHVH at the centre of the universe. Okay, so there's all kinds of things. It's problematic, that level of consciousness. We need to circumcise our hearts in order to let go of ourselves, let go of our egos. Okay, let go of our little versions of reality. This is really, really important. So we've got the 5 types of Erev Rav. I've mentioned it up here. The Amalekim is one of the types of the Erev Rav. There's 5 types. There's the Nephilim, Gibborim, Anakim, Rephaim, and Amalekim. Those 5 spell out the word Negara. The initial letters for each of those categories of Erev Rav, the 5 types of Erev Rav, spell out Negara. And Negara means evil plague. And that's exactly what we've got in the world now. We are being shown that we are jacked up to the maximum strength of the Erev Rav at this time. And globally, they've been able to control humanity through this evil plague that they have conjured up themselves, have made and created in laboratories, or whatever other kinds of bioweaponry that they're using against humanity, and all the scare tactics and all the media and all the governments of the world they're corrupting and controlling, and all this vaccination program and all the sorceries that occur through the pharmaceutical companies that are no more than sorcery and witchcraft, and everybody's falling for that. Okay, nobody's saying that this is not good. People are in a rush to follow the Erev Rav that are dominating at this time in this world. They are empowered to dominate at this time, and they're using this evil plague as a way of dominating and gaining control. Okay, so 373. But their tyranny will not last. The full ordinal, so Amalekim are the worst. They specifically attack a revelation of Moshiach ben Yosef. Okay. And they try and kill that revelation because they know that as soon as the truth regarding Moshiach ben Yosef is out, like Od Yosef Chai, their time is over. They are no more, and they don't want that. They want to remain in power with Metatron instead of Moshiach ben Yosef, because then the concept of evil exists. And they're on the side of evil, so they have got this opportunity to exist and have some kind of delusion that they're independent from God in some way. So as soon as Moshiach ben Yosef comes and reveals himself, Od Yosef Chai, and reveals that actually you thought that you was controlling what goes on in this earth, it was me in exile suffering with everybody that was actually Yod HeVave ultimately, but Yod HeVave through the soul of Moshiach ben Yosef and through the soul of Moshe suffering with us in exile is ultimately determining what goes on in terms of revelation and concealment of the name Yod HeVave, okay, in terms of exile or redemption. Okay, so there's a limited time involved with this. Okay, and it's Moshiach ben Yosef and Moshe together that will bring about an end to the Erev Rav and the evil plague and all the sorcery and all the delusion and all the evil that they're trying to impose and inflict on humanity. Okay, so that will be brought an end to. So Amakalim, which is the worst kind, which is really doubting the fact that Yosef still lives, doubting the fact, doubting the concept of Mashiach ben Yosef, doubt that Yeshua is Mashiach ben Yosef, and all these doubts, doubt that Moshe was elevated up. There's one soul of Mashiach, it was Moshe, and then it was Yeshua, and the final incarnation of Mashiach will be Mashiach ben David, and all the forces and all the good holy forces that connect together to bring about that revelation. Elijah the prophet, Jonah the prophet, Srach bat Asher, Yaakov, all these things that you need to unite together in order to bring about that revelation. Okay, the full ordinal of the Erev Rav, so if we take the 76, the 54, the 72, the 30, the 88 and the 83, added them up together, they also come to 373. Okay, so not only the Amaklim, the regular and the ordinal of the Amaklim come to 733, but also the full ordinal of all the others. What's that telling you? That's telling you that the chief or the hardest, most darkest husk and the biggest force to battle within the Amaklim, within the Erev of the Amalekim, and they're the Nazis. And there is and the eugenicists. Okay, Nazis are very much related to like the angel of death, the doctor of death, and these kind of medical experiments and eugenics, and they've absolutely no consciousness of God whatsoever. They have no consciousness of God whatsoever, and so they have no consciousness that even what they're doing is wrong. They feel utterly and absolutely supreme. It's all arrogance based. It's all because they're basically nutters, psychos and nutters that have lost their humanity. They're not fully human. That's why the Amalekites need a raising. Male and female, body and soul. That represents, by the way. The Amalekites, it says, erase their name their memory from under heaven. Okay, but that includes both male, female, and children. I think. I don't know whether the children. I'm not too sure about that. I'll have to look into it. But definitely the male and females. Yeah, they're a source of great evil. How that will play out, I don't know. I don't know whether we'll literally have to go kill these people. I'm never an advocate for anything like that. They need destroying through revelation. Revelation kills you need to kill a concealment through transforming it into a revelation. That's the way I look at it. You need to look at the spiritual doubts of your life and transform those through analysing the Torah in a correct way to reveal the truth about the concept of Moshiach. The revelation kills the spiritual concealment. That's ultimately what we've got to do. It's all at the spiritual level, not necessarily the physical level. The physical only manifests what's spiritually defective. So if you've got a spiritually defective, if you've got a doubt and you are not analysing that doubt and scrutinising that doubt until that doubt is no more, then that doubt will manifest itself physically and you'll confront it physically. So the best way to eliminate Amalek from this world is not to go around with a sword killing every human being you suspect of being an Amalekite. It may come to that, I don't know. But to me, it makes more sense to deal with it at a spiritual level, to erase all your doubts and work very hard to do that. That's what the basis of my teaching is. 100%. I know that I'm of the house of Yosef and I've got a power to be able to erase doubts because Yosef has. He's got a power to overcome Esau. He's got a power to overcome Amalek. He's got a power, and that I allow that power to be in my life. I had lots of doubts regarding Yeshua. I had lots of doubts regarding the Moshiach, but I didn't sit with those doubts. I did something about them, and I analysed. It was just I just looked at the Torah and what the sages had said, and tried to eliminate all those doubts that I had in Yeshua being the Moshiach, until I had no more doubts. And then what can manifest on the outside? And if I have no doubt spiritually regarding the truth about what YHVH has done, if I have nothing that would conceal his name from me and create shadows, I've nothing to deal with. It's all been done at the spiritual level. I don't literally have to take up arms and go Nazi hunting. I don't have to do that. That's all, I don't believe I do. It's all been settled spiritually. It will simply not manifest for me in my life if I work out all the doubts that I've got. But then, the way that it manifests in this world is that so many other people have got doubts, because this is a deep, deep, dark exile that we're in, and maybe people need some illumination, just as I've received illumination from the sages, and just as I've received inspiration from the many years of going to synagogue and all the times being to Israel and learning the Hebrew and all that the Jews have done to make this wisdom and light accessible to people like me who were lost and far away and disconnected and severed from the source of life, YHVH. So the Jewish people have helped me, and now I hope to help the Jewish people. Because I've done a work, I've taken what they've done and used it for good to eliminate doubts. And the doubts affect the Jewish people more than anybody. The Amalekites, the Nazis affect the Jewish people more than anybody. If I can do anything, let it be those doubts that have to manifest in this physical world as physical Amalekites. Let that be Amalekites. Let that be erased completely. So we've got our work to do, and I'm just very glad to be able to do that. But I do at the same time, I would like to see there to be greater and greater levels of illumination, because we need it now. We are facing these forces, and it's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable, the global level. The Nazis are not wearing swastikas anymore. They're dressed up as scientists. I don't know whether you're aware of what's called a paperclip. You need to go and look at Operation Paperclip. All the major scientists in Nazi Germany who was part of the Nazi, the Third Reich, whatever you call it, part of the Nazi party, they all got immunity from different stuff. They all came to America. There's over 1,000, over 1,400 people that were Nazi scientists that were shipped over to America and given immunity. And they're not just given immunity, they was given absolutely high-ranking jobs within the CIA. Why was they given jobs in the CIA? Because America was very much against the Russians, and they hadn't got the the heartlessness to go around killing Russians, but Germans hated the Russians so much, so the CIA employed loads of former Nazis to do the dirty work with them, with the Russians, and so the Nazis took over the CIA. Basically, it's all run by former Nazis. It was all founded by former Nazis, and then NASA. It was all the rocket scientists from the German Nazi rocket scientists that formed NASA. So you've got all these major organisations. If you look behind them, UN, it was all former Nazis, the heads of UN, former Nazis and things like that. Just look into it where they actually got to. All the major organisations, the CIA, the FBI, all kinds of things like that. Some of the major think tanks, it's all former Nazis, and it's all the scientists. It was the scientists that they give immunity to. So who do you think, all this scientific and technological development, it's all based on former Nazis that've got particular agendas, and those agendas are specifically eugenics. They want to wipe out humankind, and they want to wipe out Jewish people. Okay, people of faith, they want to wipe them out completely. And they'll do it in a lot more hidden and sinister way than what they've previously done. It won't, they even hid what they were doing in the concentration camps. They knew they knew that normal people wouldn't go along with that. But they hid it for so long. Even the German soldiers were shocked at what they'd been doing. The normal German soldiers, the ones that were full Amalekites, but these, we're talking about a level of evil. It's hard to imagine when you are a human, or when you are an Israelite. We cannot imagine the level of evil. You just have to understand from history what you're dealing with, and you can't afford to be compassionate towards this level of evil, because it's like King Saul was compassionate towards the Amalekite king, wasn't he? And then he lost his kingdom because of that. And Samuel had to kill him, but he'd already spawned seed in the time it took for Samuel to kill him, and still we've got the problem with the Amalekites, and that's what was the trouble in Nazi Germany. It's a powerful, they're not human, by the way, not fully human. They have absolutely no compassion or consciousness of God whatsoever, and that is why they need completely erasing. Okay, completely and totally annihilated. You can't keep these people alive, and America kept them alive. They should have all died, those men. They were all part of a very, very evil regime. But you see, America thought about, they wanted the intellectual capabilities of these people, and it fell for it hook, line and sinker, and now Nazis run the entire of America, basically. It's all, if you look into the history of it, it's absolutely incredible. So why have you got this erev rav? It's what we've got to battle with. It's better to battle with it spiritually, and then you don't need to go around with your with your swords and your machine guns. You don't need to think about weapons and stuff, because you've dealt with it spiritually, and that cannot. Well, if you deal with it spiritually, it cannot manifest. It's the best way to eliminate your spiritual doubts regarding Moshiach ben Yosef, and then we will not have to confront physical manifestations of those doubts, because they are terrifying. They're terrifying, very difficult to overcome. Amalekites, it's much better to deal with it at a spiritual level, so there's no manifestation possible from it. Erase all doubts regarding Moshiach ben Yosef. That's what we've got to do now. We've got it before us, this evil plague. It's presented before us. Now is the time to reveal the truth regarding Od Yosef Chai. Yosef is still alive. It's significant beyond measure. It's the difference between life and death. For many, many, many people, we need to do everything we can now. Now is the time to cry out. And if you can't figure it out on yourself, you're going to have to cry with all your strength to Yod HeVaveh to reveal it to you. Because only He can ultimately. We absolutely 100% need Yod HeVaveh to help eliminate doubts. Because doubts are very, 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 very powerful. And this level of doubt is very, 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 very powerful. And we need His help now. Right, just gone through that, haven't I? So next one. Alright, so this is where we get to the concept of circumcision that I talked about, that we would come to understanding circumcision and how it's connected to Yosef's coffin and these concepts of the two arks, because it was the number 1023, if I remember, wasn't it? Okay, so right, this is it. So you shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart. It comes to 1711 plus 199. 199 is Moshiach plus Yeshua. Okay, that's the unity of the Mashiachim again. There's one of the fillings out of Moshiach and one of the fillings out of Yeshua, and that comes to 199. I'll probably put it up at some point if it's not already on here. Okay, so we've got this 1023. Let me just go back and refresh where we get that 1023 from. The Mispar Gadol is of this here, is 2,381, which is 19 times 149, which is Chava times Melech Goyim. Okay, so this is like in exile, isn't it, under the forces of the King of the Nations. Ultimately, YHVH decides to be King of Israel and King of the Nations. Okay, so Chava represents Eve in exile. Exiled where? Well, actually we're exiled in the nations, the Goyim. And we've got to bring about a rectification to... so that even the nations serve only YHVH and nothing else beside. So we're in that process of rectification. And like I say, we've got to circumcise the foreskin of our heart. This brings us to an understanding that we've all got a very important work to do. Every single human being's got the potential to do a great, 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 great holy work, whether you are a Jew or a Gentile. And or of the lost house of Israel, like myself, we've got the potential to do a very, very, very great work, and we need all hands on deck to do what is required, because there's plenty of people that have been chariots to demonic forces, and we need as many people as possible to be chariots for divine presence. Okay, so that's connected to what we were going through. Let me just go back and show you where we get this 1023 from. Okay, so Shnei Aronoth, the two arks, come to 1023, and that's where I'd seen C over. We've already looked at the 114, we've just been looking at that. Now we're going to be going and having a look at this 1023. Okay, so I did want to actually point out the concept of Melech Goyim comes up all the time with the teachings. Why? Because this is a major thing that Yeshua is trying to establish. He's trying to establish YHVH being king over the nations also. And we know that this is a very, very messianic and very, very Torah based, because the last part of the Torah is Le'ene Kol Yisrael, before the eyes of all Israel. It comes to 149. Ordinarily, which is Melech Goyim. The beginning of Torah is Bereshith bara Elohim et hashamayim va'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, which is 298, which is 2 times 149. So the beginning and the end of Torah is Melech Goyim. YHVH decides to be king over earth as well as heaven. Okay, over the body as well as the soul, over the male and the female, over Israel and the nations. He desires for there to be unity. Okay, and that's accomplished through Moshiach. So this is very important, Melech Goyim, and we're all in a process of bringing that about, the will of YHVH. So 199 is related to Melechim, kings. Okay, and also Moshe 81 plus Yeshua, where this is at the level of Yetzirah, I think, where the Vav is filled with an Aleph and the He is filled with a He. Okay, and that comes to 199 together. So it's all absolutely wonderful. Here as well, this number here, look, is 10 times 191. And 191 are the 4 names for the Moshiach written in Talmud that spell out the initial letters of Moshiach. So Menachem for the Mem of Moshiach, Shiloh for the Shin of Moshiach, Yinon for the Yud of Moshiach, and Chanina for the Chet of Moshiach. And they together come to 191. But also the curse with which Yeshua is cursed, Yimach Shemo was the crow, comes to 100. It comes to 764. That's the regular and the ordinal of that. Comes to 764. I think it's 443 plus 121. Okay, ordinally. 643, and 121 ordinally. Together they come to 764, which is 4 times 191. So what's that telling us? It's telling us that the one who had his name erased is the Moshiach. Okay, the one who's cursed, Yeshua, comes from the initial letters of Yimach Shemo was the crow. May his name and his memory be erased. And his name and his memory has been erased from within Judaism. His brothers have erased the name of Yosef, Moshiach ben Yosef. Okay, this is the letter Ayin that they've removed from his name. So that's connected to that as well. Okay, so this whole process is beneficial for us. You know, Yod He Vav He has allowed this all to happen for an ultimate benefit. What's the ultimate benefit? To have our hearts circumcised. Because it's very humbling to know what we've been doing, and the fact that Moshiach ben Yosef and Moshe have been suffering with us in order to accomplish that. With us in this filthy, deprived, state of exile, until we are strong enough, and until we have built ourselves up, and until we have fought against these forces of doubt, revealed the truth that Od Yosef Chai, and gone through that gate that creates in order to gain access to the name Yod He Vav He face to face. It's all about a unity between Moshe and Yeshua as well. That's the truth that we've got to really grab a hold of. Right, Moshiach ben Yosef comes to 566 plus 116 ordinary, 682. So obviously 682, sorry, I was thinking it related to 1023, but it is through this number, isn't it? You shall circumcise your heart. That's 6 times 682, so it's obviously linked to 1023, because that's times 4 is this number. You shall circumcise the foreskins of your heart. Okay, so we can see it's directly related. This whole circumcision of the foreskin of your heart is directly related to Moshiach ben Yosef, who, through his blood, if you like what he said in that opening, through his suffering, his death and suffering, that he didn't want to die, remember. He begged, please take this cup, Father, lest it be your will. It wasn't a willing sacrifice. He didn't just sacrifice himself, but he obviously was put to death at the request of the Sanhedrin. He was put to death by a corrupt Sanhedrin. Okay, that's ultimately what he didn't willingly sacrifice himself. However, he was prepared to surrender to the will of God, and it was Yod He Vav He's will that this happened. Okay, so there's a difference. You've got to understand these subtle differences, because the difference between a false Mashiach and a true Mashiach is a false Mashiach will willingly descend into exile. A true Mashiach will never willingly descend. They descend if it's the will of Yod He Vav He to descend, and that was the same as Moshe. Moshe begged to go into the land of Eretz Israel. He begged not to be exiled, but he was exiled. So again, you've got similarity. Well, you've got them. They're the same. The Mashiach. So we can tell from the Mashiach certain qualities, a distinction between a false Mashiach, because there's a false Mashiach came, Shabbatai Tzvi. And why was he false? Because he willingly descended into Islam in order to hasten redemption. He was willing to go into Islam and convert, but that is not the sign of a true Mashiach. Okay, and then we've got this very important. I've just mentioned about the 4 names of the Moshiach, and how they spell the initial of Moshiach, and how it's connected to the curse of Yeshua with his, may your name be erased in your memory, and then the initial letters of Yimach Shemo with Zikro spell Yeshu. Okay, that's why we know he's cursed with that. And Yeshua is the derogatory way as the rabbis curse Yeshua. But we've got this. This follows and precedes the 4 names of Mashiach in the Talmud. So it comes directly after it. And then the rabbis say the leper of the house of Rabbi, i.e. Yehuda and Nasai, is his name. So it's all in Sanhedrin 98b, that. It's the 1364, which as we can see is related to all this. So why was he a leper? He wasn't a literal leper, by the way. He was, the revelation of Moshiach ben Yosef is contained within the verses in Torah regarding leprosy. Because hu taharath, it is leprosy, is 772, which is 2 times 386, 2 times Yeshua. It's just a coded message to get you to look at the verses in the Torah, and that is not the only instance which reveals that Yeshua is the Mashiach. He is the Mashiach, is revealed in the Torah regarding leprosy. If you go analyze alphanumerically analyze the verses of the Torah that contain the concept of leprosy, they also contain, and are hidden in there, is the truth regarding Moshiach ben Yosef. That alone is sufficient enough to reveal the truth that he's the Mashiach. But this connected to all the other stuff, you're going to eliminate all our doubts eventually. And so we should. We don't want no trace of Amalek left. Amalek synonymous with doubt. And then we've got this Yonah. This is I've not put all the things for Yonah up. Just wait a minute. No, let me just go back. So Yonah, this is Yonah spelt out. In fact, I'm actually missing. I'm going to go put the actual one on because I don't like to be inconsistent. Okay, so I realised I've already gone over Yonah in the first slide when we were analysing about the 2 aronot, the 2 arks. So let's go and have a look at this then. In your sacks comes to 921 plus 102, which is Emunah. We've already come across Emunah, haven't we, previously? And then added together they come to 1023. So it's obviously connected to all those. And in your sacks, this is where the money was put back into the sacks of Yosef's brothers in Egypt. Is a very interesting word, however, because if you look here, the first 4 letters spell Be'emeth, in truth. Okay. And then, not only that, these highlighted in pink spell Tachath. And I've already told us about Tachath. It's in place of, like Tachath Beno, instead of his son, in place of his son, who was Yitzchak. Mashiach ben Yosef was Tachath Beno. Okay, instead of his son. And also I've told you that it's Yosef said, am I in place Tachath, Hatachath of Elohim? What you meant for evil, God meant for good. So you've got that concept as well. And they're both in there, aren't they? Be'em techoteichem, in your sacks. So it's a very, very curious word, really. There's a lot contained within that concept of truth, the concept of the replacement. So through words like that, which you've got like in truth regarding the substitute, start looking at these numbers because there's a purpose for all this. What's the purpose? Well, it's somehow linked to the fact that we need a circumcised heart. That's the will of YHVH, and through that circumcised heart we're able to perceive the truth regarding YHVH face to face. We can't be circumcised, we can't be arrogant, we can't be ego-filled. We've got to lose that. And this process of exile and rectification is part of the process of circumcising the foreskin of our hearts. Okay, it's all connected, it's all gloriously connected. So we've got that as well. In your sacks is related to Shepherd of Israel. Not only that, 816 is 8 times Emunah. Okay, so we've got a double connection in your sacks to the Shepherd of Israel through Emunah and then through this here, the 921. And 921 is 3 times 307, and 307 is Rivka. Okay, Rebecca was obviously one of the matriarchs. She was Yitzchak's wife. Okay, and after Yitzchak had come down from the Akedah, he was married, wasn't he? He was, Elias was sent to get him a wife from Yitzchak's family. It was all wonderful. It's all wonderful connections to be made there. And then, and the Lord said to Satan, i.e., may the Lord rebuke you, or something like that. That's from Zechariah 3:2. That is 816. And again, that's connected to Emunah, 8 times Emunah. And this is about our faith, isn't it? It's all obviously connected to faith, in that we have got to have the faith to stand our ground in the face of all this evil, demonic forces that we're facing. It doesn't matter how overwhelming these Erivrav forces are. It's like, get thee hence, Satan, get you behind me, Satan. We don't have to serve them. We don't have to fear. We don't have to subjugate ourselves to them. We don't have to have any crazy schemes how we're going to deal with them. We simply just have to continue serving the name YHVH with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our strength. And in doing so, we will have the answer to all what may be potentially presented to us. But you don't really give it any opportunity. You don't have to bow and bend and buckle and submit in any way to an evil force. We submit to YHVH and nothing else beside. Okay, nothing else beside. And this is that statement. It's mentioned in the book of Jude, I think, regarding Michael fighting against Satan for the bones of Yosef, for the bones of Moses, or the body of Moses, it says. And this is what's quoted in you don't need to, it's quoted that I think what Michael says was, may the Lord rebuke you. You don't need to all these things can happen in a very dignified way. You don't need to stoop to conquer. You just need to know what to say and when, and know that we don't serve anything other than YHVH. We don't need to be no big dramatic battle. It can all happen in very simple, dignified, Torah-based ways through the example that we've been shown. And it's as simple as, get thee hence, Satan, or get thee behind me, Satan, or the Lord rebuke you. May the Lord rebuke you. Sometimes we just need to, when we feel a demonic force trying to take over, like fill us with fear and dread, and what can I do about this, and worry and anxiety, you just have to say simply the words, may the Lord rebuke you. May the Lord rebuke you. You don't need to say out that. I'll go and have a look at this verse and meditate on it. I'll go look at the verse in Jude, the book of Jude within the New Testament, and we don't need to lose our heads over this. We don't need to get all dramatic. We don't need big ceremonies to combat these evil forces. We simply don't. It's sufficient to be able to say, may the Lord rebuke you. And that's enough. It truly is enough. And it's certainly when it comes to our personal service to the name YHVH, we need to be saying that for every force that we perceive is not good, i.e. it's blocking us from serving that unchanging, glorious light called YHVH. Is some fear or doubt or anxiety or insecurity on this. It's just, you're just accessing constantly, and a constant flow of that glorious light is coming into your life no matter what we face. We don't need to serve anything other than YHVH. We don't need to bend our knee and bow to these forces of evil. We don't need to be afraid. We don't need to feel intimidated in any way whatsoever. YHVH is with us always. And that's the truth. Okay, so David, spelt with an additional yud, that's David rectified. Ephraim, 331, plus Moshiach ben Yosef comes to 921. Okay, so that's the concept of Moshiach ben Yosef, Moshiach ben Ephraim and Moshiach ben David together, united. Shepherd of Israel, in your sacks, all that this entailed and all the connections that we've made so far. Very, very interesting this though, isn't it? At the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh was dreaming. The initial letters is, we skip over Pesach, Passover, Pharaoh, spell Moshiach. So Meketz, Shenothaim, Yomim, Ufaro, Holem. At the end of 2 years, Meketz at the end, Shenothaim, 2 years, 2 Yomim, years. Yomim means full. And Pharaoh, Cholem was dreaming. Okay, so it spells Moshiach, Mem Shin Yod Chet, which is related to some of them things that we say in the house of Rabbi Yehuda. This is what comes after the mention of all the 4 names of Moshiach: the Mem for Menachem, the Shin for Shiloh, the Yud for Yinon, the Chet for Chanina. And then it mentions, a leper of the house of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is his name. Okay, but what is his name? His name is the one whose name was erased. That's the Moshiach. It's Yosef, Moshiach ben Yosef. And these 2 full years that he was in prison represent 2 aspects of Emunah that needed to be corrected. The Emunah in the concept of Moshiach and the Emunah in the resurrection of the dead. Okay. And those were the things that needed correcting. And because Yosef spoke 2 words, he said to the cupbearer, when he interpreted the dream of the cupbearer, and the cupbearer was reinstated in Pharaoh's household as a cupbearer, he uttered the words, remember me, I to Pharaoh, and take me out of here. So the 2 words, remember me and take me out, cost him 2 extra years in prison, because he was relying on a cupbearer, something other than YHVH, for his redemption and salvation. And it was a lack of faith in them, YHVH. YHVH is our Saviour, and that's it. He's our Redeemer, and that's it. There's no other source of power in this world at all that we can rely on for anything at all. It's YHVH. Only Him. Nothing else beside Him. Nothing else beside Him. Nothing else beside Him. And if we start to look for salvation in other ways, other than through Him, we will end up in a not so pleasant situation. Or we could end up like Yosef, suffering extra years in prison. But these 2 full years are synonymous with the 2000 millennium which Moshiach ben Yosef has been suffering in order to correct our emunah, v'bitachon, in the name YHVH. Like he looked, the emunah, we're connecting our emunah in YHVH, and that's taken a long time. Because one, we are correcting our faith in the Moshiach, and it's very difficult because we've got a lot of forces that come against us, the doubt and the sheker. The doubt is Amalek, and the sheker and the falsehood, the lies that we've inherited through our exilic mindsets that come from exiled religions, like Judaism is in exile in Erev Rav, Christianity is in exile in Edo Greco-Roman exile, Islam exiled into Ishmaelite, and with that there's just ego boosting, foreskin thickening, leads to heartlessness. Literally, Christians believe that they're killing Muslims in the name of God, and Muslims will kill a Christian thinking that they're serving God, and Jews are the same. They're so heartless towards another that they perceive as something other than YHVH. They're so heartless that their lives matter not. This is exile. This is an uncircumcised heart. You should have compassion on all, and understand the situation. And we've all been placed in exile, in different exiles. Now we either fuel our egos with that exilic mindset, or we seek a Hebraic mindset, like Yosef, who's a Hebrew. You know, he sought to better everything for everyone, you know, and to deliver them from the harshness of the plague that they, the plague and the famine that they faced at that time. Okay, so be like Yosef. So the regular and by the way, look at this. At the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh was dreaming, Moshiach contains within it, all bits is skipped over, it contains within it the concept of Pharaoh. So when we're looking around and we're seeing all these elites that are the equivalent of pharaohs, we know through Yonah that YHVH has even got a plan for them to bring them to a place of repentance, because it's written in the Midrash that when Yonah went to Nineveh, Nineveh wasn't a Jewish place, it was non-Jewish. It was a big metropolis. And it even mentions in Yonah it took, I think it was 3 days to walk from one side of the city to the other. It was a big metropolis. Okay, so thousands of people were there. Who was the king of Nineveh? According to Midrash, it was the Pharaoh of the Exodus. He fled there. And when Yonah turned up for him, he finally repented. He finally circumcised his heart through repentance. And when he repented, every single person, including the animals, he mentions it in the book of Yonah, the animals and the people, they all went through this period of cleansing and repentance. Okay, and it was Yonah that was the prophet that was sent there. So there's purpose even for these big, powerful people. Why? Because they can bring a lot of people to their knees. Through them, a whole city, a whole metropolis can be saved. Animals as well, you know. And this is a lot of souls we're talking about that bow down and serve YHVH rather than all this evil. They have the power. These big people, these pharaohs in this world, have a big power to bring a lot to repentance. When they have got the power of the prophet Yonah, united with the power of the prophet Yonah, even though Yonah was reluctant. Why was he reluctant? Because he had it, according to the sages, because he knew in his heart that these people would repent, and then that would be a mark against the Jewish people who at times have failed to repent. And he didn't want to highlight that to YHVH. But anyway, YHVH had a plan that Yonah didn't, and the plan was to bring even these powerful forces of Pharaoh under the wings of the Holy Shekinah. Okay, as we can see, that's all connected to Yosef. The 2 full years of the 2 millennium where Moshiach ben Yosef has been suffering. Yeshua ben Yosef has been in exile since 2033, since the year 33, according to the astronomical calculations of Sir Isaac Newton. Okay, so we're now in the 1988th year since Pesach this year, which is 2021. So we've got a maximum of 12 years left, because it says at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh's dreaming, and then it tells you like that Yosef was rushed from the pit. So the time of exile is very short. It's 12 years maximum left. Okay, and 12 years before Yosef is out of that pit. For real, and no more Metatron, and no more Erev Rav, no more Amaklite. Yosef stood the channel between heaven and earth, and the great abundance of the Messianic period and the great Shabbat, hopefully, will come upon us. But we're looking at a time frame of no later than 12 years. It could be 9 years, because one of the calculations that Sir Isaac Newton said, one of the dates of the crucifixion could have been the year AD 30, and if that was the case, with 3 years further into this 2 millennia, 2,000 years that are representing these 2 years that Yosef suffered in prison on account of a lack of faith. Moshiach ben Yosef represents the lack of faith of all of us. It's not just his own lack of faith. He took on the suffering in order to help us to accomplish our rectification in our lack of faith. So he's with us in this exile, helping us to accomplish that. but also driving us forward. He's a powerful force driving the entire of creation forward to that place where we're able to awaken to the truth that there's only YHVH and nothing else beside him, and we're able to receive that YHVH decides to bestow upon us. Okay, what glorious stuff. Oh, glorious stuff. Right, blade of the revolving sword, which is 1209, 156, which is Yosef. Okay, comes to 1365, which is 5 times 273. So we can see how that is linked there. I've put C over, we're not going to see over because I just took this from another teaching. So 273 is obviously linked to this concept of the blade of the revolving sword. This is linked to Metatron because it talks about the blade of the revolving sword and the cherubim that block the way to the tree of life. Okay, so the blade of the revolving sword is that, consciousness of YHVH changing all the time. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad to us. Woe me, I'm feeling blessed. It's that ever changing. We shouldn't be there. We should be clung to the tree of life where YHVH is not. He never changes. Always good, always kind, always truthful, always compassionate, always, merciful. Things like that. But we've got this revolving sword that confuses us, and these cherubim. Well, the cherubim are linked to Metatron, who's called a cherubim. He's one of the cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant. He's all kinds of mysterious things that are. There are all kinds of mysterious concepts that you need to draw together to fully understand what Metatron is. But like I say, the major connection is to know that instead of Metatron, there should be a fully revealed Moshiach ben Yosef, and that you be united to the entire concept of the Moshiach in order for that flow between heaven and earth to fully open up. So it's all connected to that and Metatron, what things we've been talking about in this lesson. Right, Melech Israel. We've already talked about Melech Goyim. Now we've got Melech Israel. Comes to 1111. Very significant, that number in itself. 631 regularly. This is the Mispah Gadol, by the way. That's 1100. That's Mispah Gadol when we dictate we give a 500 for the chaf instead of 20. So it comes to a regular of 631 and an ordinal of 100. Together they come to 1842, which is 2 times these. So it's connected. Melech Israel in your sacks, Shepherd of Israel. All this, what we've just been talking about, is exactly the same as this. King of Israel. When do we get the King of Israel? Well, when we get through this process here, this 2,000 years, when Moshiach ben Yosef, Yeshua, is suffering in Edomite exile with us in order to accomplish a correction in our faith, so that we have perfect faith in him, YHVH, and nothing else beside him. It's a process. We're in it. We're nearly at the end of it. And it's getting darker. Them forces of Erev are getting harder and harder and harder, more powerful, and that is what will happen at the end. And we have got to maintain our faith in YHVH and not bend and bow to any other force other than him. So 631 plus 100, this is the regular and ordinal of Melech Israel, comes to 731, which is exactly the same as Moshiach and Yeshua. So Moshiach is 335 plus 386 is 731, King of Israel. There's all kinds of stuff that 731 represents. It's wonderful, but it's all revealed through a unity between Moshe and Yeshua. Okay, so go back to Jonah. This is Jonah 2.2 and 2.3. This is all Jonah in the belly of the whale, crying out, I cried from the depth of the belly of the whale, and things like that. It's 2 verses there. Okay, if we add, I can't fit the 2 verses on, but if you want to go look from Jonah 2:2 and Jonah 2:3 for yourself, please do. They're incredible verses. If you add they're the regulars. If you add them up, it comes to 18 times 307, 6 times 921. So all these concepts, as like I say, is all connected, and it's very, very powerfully connected to the concept of Yonah, and the whole, even the redeeming of the pharaohs of this world. Moshiach ben Yosef is not suffering exile just for the lowly people alone. He's going for the kings too. He's going for the kings of this world. He's going for those in the top echelons of power, because he knows if he can capture those in his net, those big fish, it's enough to bring this whole system of Erev, Rav and exile to an end. You know, because these are people that have explored the depth of evil to the very, very, very nth degree, right? And when they surrender all that they have through Moshiach ben Yosef to the name YHVH, they have got the power to influence many, many, many people in their wake. Okay? And the whole story of Yonah is taught, it indicates that as well. And you know, Moshiach ben Yosef is very great. He may have in his appearance on earth, you know, be lowly riding on a donkey, but he's a king. A very, very, very great, powerful revelation of the name YHVH. Okay, these are concepts that are massive, they're beyond our imagination to how massive and glorious they actually are. You know, we've got to be careful not to limit them in any way, shape or form. We can't limit the power of YHVH because there is no limit to it. And all the things that represent, or even the gate to that name YHVH, is so glorious. You know, the light of Moshiach ben Yosef, in which we see the light of the name YHVH, it's all utterly and absolutely completely glorious. Right, why have I got this then? I am the Lord who makes all these. Isaiah. Okay, so, right, I've just got a slightly different colour. So, this is the whole process as well, isn't it? The rectification. This is from Isaiah 45:7. I form light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I am the Lord who makes all these. Something along those lines. I'm saying that from memory, the whole verse now. But what have we got to do? We've got to take the darkness and transform it into light, and take the chaos and the evil and transform it into shalom. You know, and through that whole process of transforming the darkness and the concealment of the name YHVH into a revelation, we enter from exile into redemption. Okay? Moshiach ben Yosef is helping us do that. And the prophet went and waited for the king on the way, and he disguised himself with his headband over his eyes. So this is 2046. Which is again is related to this, isn't it? I've done all analysis on this concept of being disguised. You know, there's a prophet that's disguised, there's a king that's disguised, and then there's Saul that's disguised. There's three people that are mentioned who are disguised, and that word for disguised it comes to 888. It's related to 888, which is the spelling out of Moshiach. Okay, and as we can see, it's related obviously here as well, because 444 times 2 is 888. It's something to do with that. This word, like the regular and ordinal of it, comes to 888. Something like I can't quite remember, but it's all utterly and absolutely glorious stuff. And very, very interesting. And I've done, like I say, lessons on it when it's usually I've disguised in the title of the film. Okay, so let's go to the next slide then. This is quite an interesting thing that I came across in the Zohar. It's Yaakov the Vav filled with an Aleph. Okay, this is from Shlach Lecha and paragraph 121. This is according to the numberings from the Baal HaSulam's commentary of the Zohar. It says, in the yeshiva of Bezalel, or Betzalel, and also in the two yeshivot, meaning in the yeshiva of Metatron and the yeshiva of the Holy One, blessed be he, they said that, and Yaakov was a plain tam man, means the husband of a tam, which is Malkuth. Who is he? The husband of the tam. That is the Aleph, which is part of the secret of the Vav. fully spelled Vav Aleph Vav, since Yaakov is the secret of the Aleph and Malkuth is the secret of Tam, which they include male and female together. Yaakov takes all three these letters. Aleph Tam, the secret of the Aleph Tav Mem. These are the letters of Emeth, truth, as it is written, you will show truth to Yaakov. Since truth combines male and female together, and then they are in complete perfection. Okay, so like I've mentioned before, the Zohar is very coded language. So you've got to understand what's going on. You can only really understand when you're looking at the Hebrew. But it goes back to this whole concept of circumcision to a certain degree, and then some concepts that is connected to what we're going through now. Especially this. Because the reason why he included it is because the Aaron of Yosef was called the Aaron of the Memtet, which is dead. A dead one, Memtet, is dead. So, but if you rearrange the letters Memtet, you've got Tet Mem, which is Tam, perfect. And so this is what we're talking about now, the husband of the Tam. Yaakov is called the Ish Tam, perfect man, or innocent man. Ish Tam also can mean the husband, the Ish, husband of the Tam, Tav Mem, which is Malkuth, and which when you combine that with Yaakov that represents the Aleph, you get Aleph, Tav, Mem, which can be rearranged to spell Emeth, truth. Okay, so it's a little bit technical, but then that fulfills one of the 13 attributes of mercy as revealed in the book of Micah, the higher level from within the Torah of Moshiach. The revelation of the name YHVH above the letter of the law, at the higher, more merciful levels of mercy, at the level of Keter, which is crown, you will show truth to Yaakov. That's synonymous with Wehemeth and truth that is revealed in the book of Exodus. So we know that we've got to attain this level of truth. Truth about what? Truth that Od Yosef Chai, Yosef is still alive. That's the ultimate truth that resurrects Yosef from a state of death. Okay, it revives Yaakov, which is symbolic of heaven and Tifereth. It revives Yaakov. We're told in the Torah, Yaakov is revived once he's told that Yosef is still alive. We need Yaakov to be revived because we want this flow from heaven down to Malkuth below, and that goes through the channel which is Yesod, Yaakov. Heaven and earth must unite, male and female must unite, but the channel through which they unite is Yosef. So you can understand where I'm going with it. And how it's connected to the concept of these two Aronoth, these Shnei Aronoth, these two arks, one with the Ark of the Covenant and one with the Aaron of Yosef, the Ark of Yosef containing his bones. But in the Talmud it says that is the one containing the dead, the Mem Tet. But we've got to rearrange that because he's in a state of dead at the moment. We've got to rearrange that along these. We've got to rearrange that. He's a perfect man because he's circumcised, and these words are related to circumcision. So that's a whole other concept that we've been going on in this teaching, and it's also related to a revelation of truth, and it's also related to a unity between male and female. All these are major concepts that we've got to be aware of. I'm just pointing out the different places. Okay, so Yosef is called an innocent ox. Okay, this is mentioned in Zohar 363. This is the normal numbering, not according to Ravi Ashlag's numbering. This is the normal numbering, so it's in book 3, page 163b. Yosef is called the Shor Tam. So as we can see again, the Tet Mem Tam, innocent or perfect. And like I say, the two arks that we're talking about, it's called the Memtet, the opposite way around. So we've got to reverse that, haven't we? That opposite way around brings about a concealment. We've got to transform that into the Tet Mem. And just the numbering for this, I'm not going to go through all this numbering. I'm just wanting to conceptually point out and link this up to those two Aaron and the power of the two Aaronoth that we're talking about, the two arks. So that's the regular and the ordinal. is 82, which is exactly the same as Moshiach ben Yosef. Moshiach ben David. That's the ordinal of Moshiach ben David. 93 is Melech Moshiach, King Moshiach, in the ordinal of that. And then there's all kinds of other stuff there. 37, if we add the Mispar Gadol numbering and the regular numbering, it comes to 2,627, which is 37 times 71, which is Yeshu, or the Yechida times Yonah. So again, we've got Yonah and this concept of Yechida. Yechida is the soul level of Moshiach ben Yosef, and it's also Abraham's son Yitzchak was called his Yechida. Okay, and Moshiach ben Yosef came instead of Abraham's Yechida, and he was YHVH Yechida. Okay, he was from the tip of the Yud. He was from the, like I've just talked about, the Keter, the crown, and the revelation of the name from that level. Moshiach ben Yosef and the Torah of Moshiach ben Yosef, that was really what was in the Aron. The bones of Yosef really are the revelation that we get of the higher levels of mercy of the name YHVH, the Torah of Moshiach, the higher levels of Torah, the higher levels of mercy that are revealed in the book of Micah chapter 7, the 13 attributes of mercy that are revealed in Micah 7:20, there's 13 in total. That's the Torah of Moshiach. Okay, the Torah of Moshe is the 13 attributes that are revealed when Moshe is put in the cleft of the rock and the glory of YHVH passes by, and then he calls out the 13 attributes of mercy. But that's within the letter of the law. That's a lower level of mercy. And the upper level of mercy, what's revealed in the book of Micah, must wash clean all the judgment, all the redness and the darkness, the redness and the blackness from within the Torah of Moshe, all the punishments and the judgments and the harshness. That's got to be washed clean. We set an end to darkness, and it's that darkness, the darkness of judgment and death and all that must be washed clean. It's all connected, all connected to the fact that these bones contained a dead man, but really they contained a perfect man, a tam, an innocent man. Yosef was innocent, Yeshua was innocent, he shouldn't have been sentenced to death. He was falsely sentenced to death. He was an innocent, perfect man. We've got to go and realise that and resurrect him from that place of death. Okay, to transform him from Memtet into Tet Mem. Okay, and unite that. Then that represents the Holy Shekinah, which is in the first box. It says that there's a dead man in the one box and the Shekinah in the other, but it's the Shekinah in both of them. Okay, it's the Shekinah in both of them ultimately, because we're told here that the Tam represents the Shekinah, the Malkuth, which is the Holy Shekinah, and that's got to unite with Yaakov, and because Yaakov's empowered with the truth that Od Yosef Chai. It's all these concepts have been going over and over and over again and again and again and again. Here's an interesting number, 1,530, which is 10 times 153, like the 153 fishes in the dragnet, and that's the concept of who has ascended into heaven and descended. Who ascended into heaven and descended? Well, that were both Moshe and Yeshua. They both ascended into heaven and they descended into exile, and now they need to ascend again. They need to ascend back up. They need to be resurrected from this place of death to life. Okay. And the 153 is also, there's loads of things that represents, but 120 years of Moshe's life and 33 years of Yeshua's life, add them together, 153. Okay, so they ascended and descended in order to help us, in order to reveal that truth that resurrects Yaakov, and that brings Yosef back to life, and then we can get this unity between male and female. They are in complete perfection. That's what we're heading for. Unity between heaven and earth, unity between Israel and the nations, unity between Yosef and Yaakov, unity between male and female, unity between body and soul, unity between physicality and spirituality. It's all the same concept, got different names for it. Right, so Tamim, innocent. Tamim is what Abraham was called. Abraham only circumcised with one layer. That's from Genesis 17:1. It's got this number again. We've already been through this number, haven't we? The 1,119. We went through that previously. That comes to 1,119. what number did we go? Let me just quickly do a 553. Yeah, that was the 373 that we've previously gone through on the other slide. We have gone through that today at some point. Right, so, but if we take the regular and ordinal, and then the mispah gadol and the ordinal, add them together, come to 1,667. And he made a fine woolen coat. And he made him a fine woolen coat. That's the ordinal and the regular and the ordinal. That also comes to 1,667. So we can see the connection between Abraham and this whole concept of his circumcision, and then the fine woolen coat. And we know that that is somehow linked to us going through to a place where we've got to circumcise our hearts. You know, ultimately the coat was torn and ripped and covered in blood, and Yosef sold into slavery, into this place where his life was concealed. I've got Metatron there instead. We've got to go through a whole process of revealing that truth again, that Od Yosef Chai, from the bottom to the top, and resurrecting Yosef from a state of death into a state of life. Okay, and that's connected to this concept. So it's also connected to Abraham, the patriarchs. This is also chesed, but also the need to be circumcised. This is talking about circumcision of the flesh. Then innocent. So Tam, this refers to Yaakov. We're told that this refers to the Yaakov because he's the husband of the Tam, but he's also called Ish Tam, an innocent man. It just can be, Ish can be understood as a man or a husband. So this is why the Zohar has played on that word Ish and interpreted it also husband. He's the husband of the Tam. But it can be, he's an innocent man as well. Refers to Yaakov. That's from Genesis 25:27. Comes to 440, which is 4 times Yeshua Moshiach, ordinal. 35, which is the ordinal of Yonah. Together they come to 475. It's this number here, however. Mispah gadol of 1,000. So we know that's the messianic number. It's the Moshiach ben Yosef, Moshiach ben David added together. So there's all kinds of incredible things. And then we've got this number here, 1,440. That, by the way, is, I'll have to show you it. I've not put it on, but this, when it's talking about the Vav filled with the Aleph, the Vav filled with the Aleph comes to 144. Pretty sure of it. I'll try and bring those numbers up. 35 and 46. So 35 ordinal for the regular ordinals, 46 for the mispah gadol ordinals. Adding together come to 81, and that's Moshe filled, by the way. I don't think I've put that on. But then this 144 is related to take the stick of Yosef, which is the bones of Yosef, which is the Aaron of Yosef, along with the Aaron of Moshe, the Torah of Moshe, and they need to be brought together. The stick of Yehuda with the stick of Yosef. The Torah of Moshe represents the stick of Yehuda. The Torah of Moshiach represents the stick of Yosef. So take the stick of Yosef together with the stick of Yehuda, and together they come one stick in the hand of, well, in our hand first, and then in the hand of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. So that's got an ordinal of 144. If we add the regular and the ordinal, it comes to 999, which is 999 according to Kol HaTorah are the footsteps of the Moshiach. Okay, so Moshiach ben Yosef has got complete 999 footsteps below, and then the final footstep will be revealed from above, and that final footstep is Moshiach ben David. But we've got a lot of work to do in order to reveal that. So it's all connected to this and the work that's been done in exile until that final revelation comes. Okay, and then this is opposite Yosef, the Shor Mu'ad, the ox that is warned, thrice God, from the filth of the uncircumcised other side. Okay, so then again you've got this concept of the uncircumcised and the filth and the depravity. You know, you cannot rape a child unless you have got a completely uncircumcised heart. You would have compassion on a child, yet plenty of men in this world are doing that. They are these filthy ox, you know, and the power of the innocent ox can come against that filth and depravity that we see witnessed in this evil world at this time. You know, we've got to overcome that. We've got to transform that filth and depravity. We've got to transform the darkness that is into light. It's sometimes very hard to understand, but if you get somebody who has suffered from these horrendous abuses, there's a lot of examples of people that have continued with that decline. They've continued to go down, they've suffered horrific abuse, and then they've ended up drug addicts and alcoholics and committing suicide and abusers themselves. This, God forbid, does happen. But there are some people in this world that have managed to take the depravity that they were subject to as a child, and they've turned that around into a positive, a very positive, and I can count myself amongst them. I suffered as a child from this filth and depravity, and it had me convinced that that's all I were for a very long time, until that light that was in dominated over that evil reality that I'd been exposed to. And then I always said this, I never had anything handed to me on a plate. I always got darkness. I always got darkness in abundance, but I had to do something with that darkness. I had to transform the darkness that had been exposed into light. And it's a very hard journey. It's an overwhelming journey, because you believe that you are the darkness. This thing gets a hold of you and sucks you in, and you can end up on a very, very slippery slope, and you can feel that all you are is this impurity and depravity, and that's all you'll ever be, and you'll never be able to escape the pain and torment and torture of it. But you can, because the light that was in us is greater. And we've got to allow our souls to be strengthened and empowered against these forces of impurity. So whatever purity I've attained in my life, and I have attained high levels of purity, despite having a filthy, depraved, perverse input, shall we say, I've been purified, man, and whose purity is going to be stronger and better? Somebody who's had to go from a place of total utter filth and depravity to one of true innocence and purity, one that you had to work for, one that you had to strive for, one that you had to cry for, one that you had to beg for. My purity did not come. I've said this before, YHVH doesn't hand anything to us on a plate. True light, you want true light, you're going to have to go battle against the forces of darkness to get it. And this is the same with everything. And we've got to not to be defined by the darkness. We've got to be defined by the light of the name YHVH, because that's who we are. And even when those forces of darkness are very, 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 very overwhelming and shame-filled and guilt and regret and despair and disappointment and all the shadows that a dreadful evil situation that you've been exposed to can inflict upon you, that is not who we are. That is not who we are. We are not that. And sometimes we've got to take all those feelings, and like I say, we've got to let the light and the truth within overpower that reality, which is a state of death. This is what separates us from the name YHVH. We've got to overpower it to absolute degree, to all that is revealed in our lives in the name YHVH. And our purity was not given to us, handed to us on a plate. We had to transform the filthy self into light. But when we are people that have managed to do this, we have got an extra added spark in us. When we have managed to do that, and it's a hard job, and it's a continuous job. We never reach perfection. There's always something else to perfect. I can sit here and think perverse thoughts, or think about, you're drawn and you learn towards certain perverse images, because that's what you had those are the things that you're subject to as a child, and you've got a certain you've been sexualized in a certain way that's not healthy, pure or good, and you have got to learn how to control that. You've got to learn to turn away from impulses that are evil, that have been instilled into you. It can even come pre-verbal. I mean, literally, you might have no memories. No memories. I don't have any memories of not being abused. I've no memories prior abuse. I've no memories as a child prior abuse. I've nothing like that. So I've only known that. So obviously there's consequences to it, but we are not going to be slaves to that. We are not going to serve that. We are in a process of revealing the truth of the name YHVH and serving only Him. Okay, so there is this. We've got to circumcise our hearts. And this filth, it can make you very self-conscious, and it can make your ego, even if it's low self-esteem, it can still make you self-obsessed. You've got to circumcise your heart. And this is a difficult process, because sometimes it's harder to let go of pain than it is to grab hold of joy. You know, it's hard to let go of the impurity in order to grasp what is pure, truly pure. And sometimes it's hard to let go of ourselves, because we've identified with that pain and darkness for so long. You know, we don't know what the light looks like moles hidden in these situations. But, you know, this whole Moshiach ben Yosef is with us, suffering until we do. And he is willing to suffer with us in these dark places until we find that truth that sets us free. You know, he is the power with us in exile to overcome these forces of, like the shor mo'ad, the ox that was warned, this filth of the uncircumcised other side that we've all been subject to. We've all had this enforced on us. The kids are getting educated this at school. Any manner of filth that they can educate with children, they're doing. And even the Disney films and everything, the sexualisation of children, even from the types of clothes that they're wearing, everything is a filthy, depraved lot. And we've got to take that filth and transform it into light. That's the level of transformation that we have got power to do when we attach ourselves to the truth, which is Moshiach ben Yosef, Od Yosef Chai. It's all glorious, by the way. And the ox that thrice God, the filth of the membrane, Yosef pushed aside the ox of the other side. He pushed aside. He transformed that. He transformed it from darkness into light. And he, thank God, when we get in this, you imagine all this perversity that think they're getting away with it. And when he is revealed, Od Yosef Chai, you imagine this ox, this filthy ox is no more. You know, we've got a pure, innocent ox instead. And it's just glorious. My soul longs for that. My soul longs for that. On account of all the depravity I've had to suffer and the consequences of that, being exposed as a child to so much depravity, you know, I await that day, and I know it's the truth. I know this purity and all this. It says the spirit of impurity will be removed. You know, and it'd be wonderful. We've got such wonderful things to look forward to. So it's all connected to this unity that we've got with these two arks. It's a wonderful power that we've got in our life. So let's have a look at this statement then about Yosef being the dead one. You know, it says that was in the previous one. This is now looking at this bit then. Why are these two arks together? That was the question in the Talmud, wasn't it? And then it's this one, i.e. the deceased Joseph fulfilled all that is written in this. So the bones that are in this one of the dead man fulfilled all all what was written, the commandments, the Torah of Moshe, that's in the Aron of the of Habrit, Aron HaBrit, the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, how's it so that he's dead then? Because the Torah is life, the tree of life. So how can somebody be actually dead when they did nothing but fulfill the commandments, which are life? Because the sages say people who fulfill the commandments, the righteous never truly die. So there's a contradiction there, isn't there? Because he cannot be dead if he completely fulfilled all that Torah. He's alive. He is alive. We've got to be aware of that. It says, therefore it is fitting that the two acts should lie side by side. Right, so let's have a look. This one, i.e. Yosef fulfilled all that is written in this. This is incredible. This is where we're now going to start looking at the forces, the demonic forces. You know, I've just been talking about this perversion and filth. I mean, these men who were chariots for the most powerful, evil forces imaginable, like the ox that God, they become chariots to that. We hopefully in our life can be chariots to the divine presence, the Holy Shekinah, like Yosef was. We can become divine chariots. But there's a lot of people in this world that are not. They are filthy chariots, demonic chariots, chariots of the Egyptians, iron chariots. There's different names, but they are not holy chariots. They are that means that the people that abused me were like filthy, depraved chariots that brought into a little girl's life this filth and depravity. Pure innocent child, never got a chance to escape, was inflicted with this vile, filth, and I was innocent. And yet this was inflicted upon me by somebody who was willing to succumb to whatever depraved, demonic influences that they allowed them to subject themselves, that they would take an innocent child and mercilessly deprive them of their innocence, mercilessly, for nothing, for a momentary pleasure, that could destroy an entire child's life. So we're talking about massive demonic forces here, and this is not just happening, it's happening on a big scale. We've got to open our eyes. These are massive chariots, but they're like they're not full of human. When you take on the role of a demonic chariot and you are inflicting demons in people's life and demonic satanic forces, that literally, take an innocent child and flood them full of evil. Flood them full of evil to a point where they're often overwhelmed by that evil, till that's the evil is all that they know that they are. Okay? We have got these are real battles we have to face. I had to face it. I nearly succumbed to that evil that was imposed is impregnated into me, or whatever. The filth that I was exposed to through these people that are vehicles, chariots to demonic forces, filthy demonic forces of the other side. Okay, but like I say, you take that darkness and you've got to transform it into light. So we've got to find the holy opposite of these demonic forces. So we're going to see from here how this is related to powerful demonic forces, like what I said. This one, Yosef fulfilled all that is written in this. 1009 plus 181. Very significant. Okay, buried in Shechem. So we know who was buried in Shechem. This is Kovro Bishechem. Buried in Shechem. His grave in Shechem. Okay. This is Yosef, who was buried in Shechem. This is taken from the Torah. And I've been to his grave. I once had the privilege of going to his grave, and I had to go on. I've spoke about it quite a lot, but anyway, it was just a glorious blessing. I hope I can get back there soon. Right, but the regular and the Mispah Gadol, which is very significant, look, 1,230, which is 10 times 123. 123 is Kate's Shem Lechoshech. He sets an end to darkness. The ordinary sets an end to darkness. What darkness? The darkness of all the filth and judgment and evil that we've been talking about. How does that come about? When we unify the Torah of Moshiach and the Torah of Yosef together as one, to reveal the full power, cleansing power of the name YHVH in our lives. Okay? So that's connected to this whole concept, and this is the holy version, isn't it? Because he's buried but he's still alive. Right, Moshiach spelled in full. So you've got Moshiach comes to 878 regular, 131 ordinarily, which we keep pointing out that, don't we? 131 times 3 is 393, which is Shiloh. But there we go. So this is more of the holy side of it. All this is connected to a revelation of Moshiach. Okay. And we've got this concept. Okay. This is unbelievable. This teref is taken from the dove who had the olive leaf. She plucked the olive leaf, and she had the olive leaf in her mouth. So this is taken from there, but that word tref is also done to describe Yosef's garment being completely torn. It says tref Yosef. It's repeated the words tet resh pe. Okay, and that's a whole other study. It's an incredible study. But the mispar gadol of tref, plucked, torn, or prey, that's how it's used, and it can also mean torn meat that you're not supposed to eat, or prey, or plucked, or torn like Yosef's coat was torn and covered in blood. The coat of many colours. So 1009 for that. 55 ordinarily comes to 1064. Okay. Put C Yosef. That might be something else. So look at this then. This is the unholy opposite to this evil, okay, is Satan. So we're talking about these demonic forces that act like ox that gores, that create all this filth and from the uncircumcision. They're not circumcised. They're not circumcised, and they've no circumcised heart, because you couldn't inflict your level of wickedness and what you do to people if you had any measure of circumcision on your heart at all. If you had any compassion for humanity, any love, any care, anything that represented that would be an imitation of the name YHVH, you could not possibly do evil. And if you are not imitating the name YHVH, you will be imitating Satan instead, because there's no spiritual void. It's either one or the other. You either choose life or you choose death. Your choice. You're either doing good or doing evil, and it's as simple as that. You're either a chariot for the divine presence or you're a chariot for a filthy, goring arks and all the other demonic, satanic forces, the thief, the liar, the cheat, all the scumbags. Scumbag behaviour that we've got to suffer in this time of exile. That's who you'll be a chariot for. It's one force or another. It's what you choose. We've got that choice. You know, like I said before, you've got to learn how to say get thee, hence Satan. So Satan, this is the mispar gadol when the nun is 700. So obviously that comes to 1009. Exactly opposite this. So Yosef being tref Yosef. Yosef being his coat being torn, and I think Yaakov, it was Yaakov that said tref Yosef. I'm pretty sure. It's like he's been completely torn to pieces by an animal. You know, that's what Yaakov believed. His tref Yosef is being completely torn to pieces by an animal, and obviously not. But he is in this state in order somehow to overcome these powerful demonic forces. He's had to go into hiding, and he's hidden in this illusion that he has been completely torn to pieces and dead, but he is not dead. He lives. Od Yosef Chai. But he's got to go into that situation in order to overpower these satanic, demonic, evil forces of the other side, representing uncircumcision. Until we circumcise our hearts and humble ourselves and say, no, I don't want to serve. I don't want to be a chariot for satanic forces, demonic forces doing evil against humanity, and just to try and protect myself and my own ego. No, I would really rather serve the name YHVH and imitate him in everything I think, say and do. And I have no desire whatsoever to empower and serve Satan. I have no desire to be a chariot to that. And when we recognise it within ourselves, we've got to say, get the end, Satan, and really try and come against those forces, and don't accept them. Don't just say, oh, this is who we are. It's not who we are. It's who we are when we're in a state of being uncircumcised. We couldn't even, even when we're sinning against ourselves, we couldn't sin against ourselves if we had love for ourselves, which is what we should have, if we are truly aroused to the truth of who we are in the name YHVH. Okay. The mispar gadol, that's the mispar gadol of Satan. Yeshua, which is the only opposite this verse, which is Moshiach ben Yosef. He's the one that's considered dead as he's the one that's been sold into exile, just as Joseph was sold into Egypt, in Egyptian exile. He was the one, but it's for a purpose, like I say. It's to go in and in a hidden way undermine and overwhelm this verse. Okay, to reveal the truth. To reveal the truth. We are not to reveal the truth, Od Yosef Chai, and that's really an aspect of our own soul. Yosef is still alive, and that's got to be our own, the light within us. And that's like, in your light we see light. We've got to have that light aroused within us, and in that light being aroused within us, we see the light of YHVH also aroused within us, and we become a chariot for the holy name YHVH rather than Satan. And that's all made possible through Moshiach ben Yosef, who is Yeshua. And 532 is 2 times this. Okay, so we can see he was the one who was treif, 2 times torn, definitely torn, because 2 times this equals this. He was the one that was torn. He was the one that was sold into slavery. In all the house of Israel. So this is the stick of Yosef. When it talks about the stick of Yosef, which we've just talked about on the previous slide, then it mentions about, and united with the stick of Yosef is all the house of Israel. Because the lost tribes of Israel are really part of the house of Yosef. So they're part of the stick of Yosef. So we're talking about, and all the house of Israel, stick of Yosef, is 1099. So also, in a very disguised way, Moshiach ben Yosef has had to appear dead in order to go in and take from the other side those souls that were entrapped by Satan in the filth and depravity of the other side, and bring them out to the side of holiness, like myself, a total slave to Satan, a total slave to the filthy ox that God and all these other demonic forces. They was what dominated my life. And because that's all I thought that I was, it just leads to more sin and evil. But your Moshiach ben Yosef reached me in my place of exile. I was truly exiled. I'd never known anything other. I was born into exile. So 109, it comes in for the lost of the house of Israel and others beside. That 127, by the way, is a filling out of the name Yeshua, where the Vav is filled with a Yud. Just to point that out. Wisdom of truth, Chochmat ha-emeth. We're talking about emeth, aren't we? We're talking about on the last slide, when we're looking at the Zohar, Tam, which is, well, the one who's deceased, the one who's memtet. We were talking about turning the memtet around to mean tam, innocent and perfect. But here we've got the memtet, haven't we? We've got aleph, memtet, ha-emeth. So we take the aleph that's representing Yaakov and connect that to the mem, the tam mem, which represents the Holy Shekinah or the Malkuth. And then we get the word emeth. It's all about truth. We need the truth. What truth? The truth that we don't belong to the other side. We don't belong as slaves to Satan, the Satan. We're children of the living God. We're children of YHVH. We have a soul, and our soul is what should dominate over reality. We shouldn't be subject to highly satanic demonic forces. We should be serving the name YHVH and nothing else beside. That's the truth. But that truth needs alivening within us, and we need to connect to the soul of Moshiach ben Yosef and Moshe in order to fully aliven that reality and truth within us. Okay, whenever the arks set out, Moshe would say, so we've got Ha'aron. Okay, and Moshe would say, arise. Okay, this is a powerful connection, because we've not only got the 1009, this is also another powerful connection to loads of wonderful stuff. But the initial letters spell out, can be rearranged to spell Kuma or Mikveh. Both of them are associated with Moshiach ben Yosef, because Kuma, it says, my sheaf arose, and in Kol HaTorah, Vilna Gaon said that anything to do with Kuma, arise, is to do with Moshiach ben Yosef. So we've got Moshiach ben Yosef's coffin called the Aron, just as exactly the same word used in Torah to describe the Ark of the Covenant. Yosef was put in an Aron, embalmed within an Aron, and Ha-Aron, the Ark of Yosef, and the tablets of Moshe, the tablets of the commandments, was put into the Haron Ha-Barith, the Ark of the Covenant. It's got different names, by the way. So the initial letters can spell Kuma or Mikvah. Okay, so mikveh is the power that we've got to erase the doubts regarding Moshiach ben Yosef. It's associated with the mikveh. He arises when we mikveh. We immerse and go below the water and cleanse ourselves from all the filth and depravity that we've been subject to. We need to cleanse ourselves from all the evil influences in our life. And then the soul of Moshiach ben Yosef will arise within us. And it's all wonderful, it's all absolutely glorious, but we first have to immerse, we have to go below and let go of all that filth and let go of all the influence and all the demonic forces, and it's like being born again. Also, the word mikveh is 151, and 3 times 151 comes to 453, and 453 is one of the words used in Torah to describe the commandment to erase the memory of Amalek, which represents doubts and Nazis and stuff like that. So there's all kinds of powerful connections in that statement. Whenever the ark set out, Moshe would say, arise. Okay. Loads of stuff. I can't go into it all now. And then sit in the dust. This is sit in the dust of the rabbis. Okay, so that comes to 1007. If we put 2 kalel on, an aleph for each word, that also comes to 1009. We've got to protect ourselves with the wisdom of the sages. We've got to sit in their dust, as we might find ourselves sitting in the dust of Satan instead. You know, we've got to cling to the light and the wisdom, and that they are able, and the guidance, they're guiding us through exile, and it's absolutely wonderful. But we've also got to cling as well and learn from the teachings and the lessons that have been left to us that are to be found in the New Testament. We've got to be a little bit careful, because there are some distortions and corruptions that have occurred in the New Testament, but I'm talking about the teachings that are Torah based and that can be proven from within the Torah, and the whole concept of the 13 attributes of mercy, the inner dimension to the name YHVH, the all merciful level of a revelation of the name YHVH above the letter of the Torah. I'm also talking about that as well. We've got to immerse and cling to that revelation, and wash clean the judgments from the Torah of Moshe. Right, not one of them is missing. Achat meheina lo na'a dora. This is talking about that verse, seek out the book of YHVH. Okay, not one of them is missing. It's from their highly messianic text. I've done a whole analysis of it, but I haven't got time to go through it. But all these numbers are highly significant, not least of all this one. Not one of them was missing. Okay. 140 is the regular, which is 2 times ayin. We'll come across 140 again later on. It's also 10 times David. So ayin is the name that is missing off the name of Yeshua, by the way. And then you've got this spider, which is the 869. This is a spider that's mentioned in Mishle, which is Proverbs 30:21, the spider grasps with its hands, and it's to be found in the palaces of the king. It's code name for Sarach Bat Asher. Okay, she's in the palace of the king, and she's secretly helping Moshe, and she's just part of the whole concept of the Moshiach that is exiled at this time, but obviously serving a great purpose as well, to reveal the bones of Yosef and to bring about that end through Moshe to the exile. Okay, so the spider is a coded message for Sirach Bat Asher. I can't go over why she's a coded message, but basically the entire of that verse, I think it's a misbagadol, comes to 2220, which is a spelling out of Sirach Bat Asher. Okay, and build it up in days of yore, that is talking about the fallen booth of David. So that's also 869. So we've got a link there to that. And then we've got this 709, which is Yeshua. This is what needs building up. It needs his ayin added back onto the concept of Moshiach ben Yosef to bring him from a state of death to life. And we've got that 393 again. We've got another 393 up there, and it will come later in the teaching as well. What else have we got? So we've got this, and God made two great luminaries, the great luminary to rule the day and the lesser luminary to rule the night, and the stars. So that has got a regular and ordinal, and together they come to 6,654, which is 6 times 109. 1009, sorry, which is related to all this. There's incredible numbers there. 6 times Yonah and a V as well. Let me think what would be 6 times Yonah and a V. It might be the 889. There's 6. No, it's not that. 834. Alright, so the 834 is 6 times Yonah and a V, 139. Okay, so again you've got the sign of Yonah. And what are the two luminaries? The two luminaries are Moshiach ben Yosef, Moshiach ben David. And this is also similar to the vision that Yosef had, didn't he? He said the sun and the moon and the stars will bow down to me, kind of thing. They shall neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the land shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the seabed. So a massively wonderful prophecy there. 3027, which is 3 times 100 and 1009. Okay, so connected to that, we've got to defeat the forces of Satan so that the knowledge of YHVH covers the water. The land shall be full of the knowledge of YHVH as waters cover the seabed. So that's what we want, don't we? We're usually more conscious of what Satan is doing because we haven't transformed the darkness of our exposure to him into light. We've got to say, okay, yeah, I know Satan is nothing more than a servant of YHVH, but when you are trapped under that reality and you haven't yet transform that reality into a consciousness and awareness, there's only actually YHVH for good, and it gives us a work to do, and sometimes that work is very, very, very difficult, but once we have completed that rectification and transformed all that we have suffered and struggled with from the darkness that is into light, then we've got something of very, very, very great value to us. It's not like we've been handed it to on a plate. No, we've had to forge it. We've had to forge it in the crucible of life. It's not easy to accomplish, but it's very, 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 very wonderful when we do. Okay, and Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and he placed upon his son Yitzhak, and he took into his hand the fire and the knife, and they both went together. So, if you take the initial letters which are in red, it spells Yeshua. So this is Moshiach ben Yosef, who was, instead of Yitzhak, Tachath Beno, instead of his son, he was cursed and hidden. Okay, so he had to be hidden, and it's just all glorious. It's utterly and absolutely glorious. So it's obviously pointing to Yosef. And this is him in his state of presumed death, but he isn't dead, he lives. Right, some more fantastic Gematriyah coming up. we're looking at the 181. I'm going to look at 2 slides with this on because there's a lot involved in this. So we've got great is your faithfulness, Rabba Amuna Tacha, which comes to 724, which is 4 times 181. We've got this 94 as well, which is another very significant one, because why? Buried in Shechem, which we've just gone through, which number? I think we've gone through 199 or some other number, but 94 is buried in Shechem, which is Yosef. Okay, and we've got that mispagad, all the 1,230, which is 10 times 123, 10 times Kates Shem Lechoshech. He sets an end to darkness. He sets an end to us perceiving nothing but the evil and transforming that into a wonderful revelation of light. Okay, where there's only YHVH and nothing else beside him. So this is the evil opposite force, isn't it? He's buried in Shechem. Why? Well, because of this force, Samael, which is another name for Satan. Okay, so he is buried in a place where it looks like, he said, just wait a minute, that word buried, it should have a cuff in front of it. Let me just change that quickly. Okay, so I've changed that now. Kovro Bishchem. So I have actually been there, and I'm very, very pleased that I have. But it's all the opposite, this, isn't it? He's buried in Shechem, and like Moshiach ben Yosef, he's buried in this exile, if you like, in a place, in a state of death, but he's not really dead. But it's only to overcome these forces, these evil forces. Okay, and it was a delight to the eyes. So this is Eve looking at the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and it's described of, and it was a delight to the eyes. Okay, so it's obviously blinded her in some way, and blinded her to the forces of evil. But at the same time, I've pointed this out to you before. Tahawa, who, pleasing, a delight. It was a delight. Tahawa, who, as the same gematria as Moshiach ben David. So I've pointed this out before. Could she see that there was an opportunity to further perfect ourselves, but we would have to go through a process of severe rectification, where we would have to have the knowledge of both good and evil, and then choose good, and like this process of resurrect ourselves from a place of death, you know, in order to attain that perfection of our faith, so that we could earn the right to have a face-to-face relationship with YHVH rather than be given it to us on a plate. So there's different ways to look at this whole situation, and I did a big teaching on it. It was, I'll put it in the comments, I'll try and put it in the comments, a teaching where I looked at the whole concept of the Ouroboros, which is the serpent with its split tail that's shoved in its mouth and wrapped around your brain, and it's quite an interesting, it's a very, very interesting teaching. I'll try and remember to put it in the comments and have a look at it, and I might put it on at the end. It just gives a different perspective of what was there actually a sin involved in this, or was just a realization that in order for us to truly attain our full potential, that we had to do a lot of work that included a massive spiritual descent into this reality that's equivalent to death, but then the ultimate resurrection from the dead, to raise us back up to our place in Gan Eden. But this time, when we have earned the right, when we have battled with all these forces of evil and transformed them into light and withstood the temptations and everything like that, to choose to serve YHVH and nothing else beside, look at the numbers. Exactly the same as buried in Shechem. Okay. Exactly the same, 670, and the Mispagadol is also 1230, which is really quite extraordinary. And there's all kinds of other numbers there that are incredible. You've got the 131 there as well, you know, connected to 393, which is Shiloh, the united force of the united concept of Moshiach. So we've got 94 here, the fallen of David. So the fallen booth of David. Okay, this is Moshiach ben Yosef. He is in a state of fallenness. He fell, i.e. he descended into exile. And then you've got this Amalekim, the ordinal of that's 94. And that's the force that blinds our eyes, if you like, to the truth that Od Yosef Chai, Yosef is still alive. And then we've got this. So we've got this 181 is the same as with the sun and before the moon. I've pointed this out loads. Im Shemesh Wolifnei Yoreach. The initial letters spell Yeshua. Okay, your rearrangement spell Yeshua. And this is the only place in the Tanakh where the letters at the end of the end letters in order according to the flow of the text spell Moshiach. Okay. So it's Moshiach. Who's the Moshiach? Yeshua. We've got that concept of the sun and the moon again, haven't we? We've just come across, the sun, the great luminary for the day and the lesser luminary at night, and the stars. Okay? And then we've got this, the house of God, Beit Elohim. So this is what Yaakov, when he saw the vision of the ladders from heaven to earth, he called it, this is none other than the house of God. So we can see how that's very much related to the concept of Moshiach. Okay. Take for yourself Yeshua, the son of Nun. So that comes to 181. So we know Yeshua, son of Nun, is an appellation for Moshiach ben Yosef. That's 181. And then we've got the concept of face-to-face, that's what we wanted to get to. We wanted to get into a face-to-face relationship with Yod He Vav He, personal relationship. So that's 362. That's 2 times 181. And then we've got 110. And 110 is Yeshua, the ordinal of Yeshua HaMashiach. Right, they're going to go through some more numbers of 181. But this time we're going to be having a look at this particular verse. He made an end to darkness, and every end he fathoms a stone of darkness and the shadow of death. So overall, the regular of that comes to 16 times 181. And then there's all these other numbers as well. We're going to have a look at some of them. But this is Kate's Shem L'choshech. He sets an end to darkness. And that's we come across this all the time. It's a key messianic statement. Right, so this is where we go now to the wine that Yosef didn't taste, okay? He didn't drink wine, and I will show you why he didn't drink wine, but we'll just go from the day that Yosef took leave from his brothers, he did not sample a taste of wine. That's from Shabbat 139a. Okay, so I'm going to go through this slide because a lot of the numbers we've already brought up, the 181, and I just want to quickly go through some of these concepts, and then we're going to have a look at this in a little bit more depth. But as you can see, from the day that Yosef took leave from his brothers, he did not sample a taste of wine. We're going to go look at some of what the rabbis have said about that. But I just want to point out that this whole concept of he made an end to darkness is linked to the fact that Yosef did not take wine. Okay, and when we look at why, it'll become very clear, because he's really petitioning. He's petitioning his brother for the sake of his brothers that sold him into slavery, for them to be saved and not punished. And he's in a constant state of prayer whilst he's suffering in exile. For his Jewish brothers who sold him into slavery, and that's why he doesn't take wine, because you're not allowed to be inebriated when you drink wine. That's according to the sages. He's got the 393 again. Let's go and have a look at this 393 whilst we've got a chance. Okay, I'm just going to pull up a slide that I've got for that. Okay, so this is obviously not all the 393s, but just to show how it is connected to the whole concept of the Mashiach and its unholy opposite force that we've got to fight in order to reveal the Mashiach. Okay, so Shiloh, 345 regular, 48 ordinary, 393. That's Moshe. The regular of Moshe is 345, so that's linked to the concept of Shiloh. Yosef is the ordinal, which is linked to it. 2 times David, rectified, is 48, so that's linked to that. So that's 3 of the concepts of Mashiach. You've got Moshe, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. And we've got another concept here, Sarach bat Asher. She's the final letter here. Moshe, it goes, Yosef is the tip of the Yod. David is the Yod. Moshe is the He. Yaakov is the Vav, and Sarach Bat Asher is the final here. So Sarach filled out comes to 293, plus the 100 of Yaakov. She unites to Yaakov, that comes to 393. There's two ways we can add 100 to her. So we can either have the two of Yaakov, the 53 and the 47, so that then you've got all 5 aspects of Moshiach. But also she's described as peaceful and faithful. The sages say that this relates to Sarach Bat Asher, because these words, according to the sages, are referring to Sarach Bat Asher. In fact, i.e., I completed the number 70 in the count of the faithful who went down to Egypt with Yaakov. So she was the 70th person. So she completed, and shalume is to complete something. Like shalom means wholeness and completeness. And faithful, emuneh, the faithful of the 70 was classed as faithful. So she was the one that completed the number 70 of the faithful who went down to Egypt, and that's an ordinal of 100. So we can add that to Sarach Bat Asher and we get 393, and that's why all the aspects of Moshiach are related back to this 393. There's other things. That 587 as well is that's peaceful and faithful. 487 plus 100 comes to 587. 587 is the first occurrence in Torah, Machol Malachto, all his work, i.e. all his work was completed. Okay, and we're in a process of 6,000 years, which is synonymous to the 6 days where God created all his work. Okay, and we've got to rectify and complete all our work in the 6,000 years, and we're in the last 2,000 years, the years where Moshiach ben Yosef is suffering in exile with us to complete our faith, and we're very nearly at the end of this cycle, and we'll enter into the 1,000th year of Shabbat. Okay, binding sheaves also comes to regular and ordinal 393. That's a binding sheaves. It's Yosef in the fields binding the sheaves. My sheaf arose. Okay, Yeshua is also spelt out, comes to 393. It's Moshiach ben Yosef suffering in exile with us. The Lion of the tribe of Judah, 300 plus 93. That's Melech Moshiach, King Moshiach as well. 93 is King Moshiach. And that's also Ruach Elohim, Spirit of God. 393 for that. And then this is the evil, isn't it? Because Negara, the evil plague of the 5 initial letters of the Erev Rav, the Nephilim, the Gibborim, the Anakim, the Rephaim, and the Amalekim, comes to 393. The 5 redeemers, what we've got up here, unite to overcome the 5 evil forces. Okay, it's all utterly glorious. So we can see this 393 is related back to the fact that Yeshua, who is Moshiach ben Yosef in exile, didn't take any wine, and like his own words said, which we will come to, I'm not going to take any wine until I drink it in the kingdom of God. I can't remember it word for word because I'm not as familiar with New Testament stuff as perhaps what I should be, but it's all connected and it's all glorious. Let's go back. Okay, so there we've got the 393 that I've just gone through, the Shiloh and everything like that. I go through it quite a lot. And then we've obviously got this come up again because it's related. So it's not only related to the fact that he doesn't take the wine, but this, what we've just been looking at, is 181. So it's related to he made an end to darkness. It's all part of one glorious fulfillment. Okay. Only 4 cubits of halakha alone. So this is taken from Talmud, and it says that Yod He Vav He, since the destruction of the temple, has only got 4 cubits of halakha alone in which he dwells. Okay, so it's all coded messages, by the way. All this is coded message in some ways. It's obviously not literal because he fills all and surrounds all, but it's all a coded message, but it's linked up to this. This is where does he dwell? Well, he's dwelling in He's dwelling with Yosef in some way. Through Yosef he lives, if we can understand that. Not only has Mashiach Yeshua been crushed and broken and sent into exile, so has the Holy Temple, and to a large degree the name YHVH, like I say, the flow from heaven to above, below has been concealed. The name YHVH has been concealed because why? Because we're in a place where the truth is not revealed, and YHVH is synonymous with the truth, and that doesn't empower Yaakov. Yaakov's in a diminished state with no Ruach Elohim. The Spirit of God has left him. There's no Ruach HaKodesh, Holy Spirit, that's invigorating him. And all this diminishes that flow of light from above to below until we reveal that truth, Od Yosef Chai, and all that I've talked about previously. So we're limiting YHVH. We're limiting YHVH all the while Mashiach ben Yosef is suffering in exile till we've completed that task. But it's all by the will of YHVH. And all this is connected to that. Right, Son of Man, can these bones become alive? This is talking about Ezekiel's prophecy, isn't it, with the dry bones? But there's so much you can read into that. And the fact that Ha'atzmoth, Ha'ele, it's these dry bones were basically the bones of the tribe of Ephraim, according to the Midrash, who supposedly left Egypt believing the redemption had already come, and then they got slaughtered by the Plishtim, the Palestinians. No, the Plishtim are the not the Palestinians, are the I can't remember the name of them now, it'll come to me, but the Palestine, I've forgotten the name of them in English, it's just gone out of my mind, but they got slaughtered by them anyway, the Palestine, the Philistines. I knew it would come eventually. The Philistines slaughtered them, and then when the children were coming out of the land of Egypt, and he said they couldn't go that way of the land of the Philistine. That's why they ended up going and ultimately having to cross the Red Sea, because they didn't want to go straight up via the land of the Philistine, the Philistines, because of all these dry bones that was about still, and they didn't want to be reminded of all the death, and God took them around that because he didn't want them to see all these dry bones. And how did they know it was a tribe of Ephraim? Because you can tell from the census. There's a massive drop in the tribe of Ephraim, and it's this mysterious drop, and I put it down to the Midrash have interpreted that mysterious drop in the numbers of the count of the tribe of Ephraim to them actually leaving Egypt early, believing the redemption had already come before its time, and then they just got slaughtered by the Plishtim, the Philistines, and their dry bones are in that valley until this day. So this is obviously related to Yosef, because Yosef, he became the two tribes, didn't he? The tribe of Manasseh and the tribe of Ephraim. So these bones that are spoken about in Ezekiel are very much related to the tribe of Ephraim that is connected to Mashiach ben Yosef. So there's all kinds of wonderful connections there. Son of Man, can these bones live? Only you know, God. 1,448 equals 181, which is the number that we're looking at up here, times 8. So all these have to come together as one. It's all incredible prophecy and revelation. And again, this is connected again, isn't it, to the resurrection of the dead. You know that these bones, when Yosef was the resurrection, when he is resurrected from the dead, so too this is his son and the tribes that belong to Yosef, the house of Israel, which is often called Ephraim, the tribe of Ephraim. The house of Yosef is usually called Ephraim. Okay, and it means the 10 lost, the 10 lost tribes of Israel, called the house of Yosef. What stands opposite that then? We've got this force again, Amalek, haven't we? Amalek filled comes to 1,448. Absolutely opposite, doing everything he can to prevent a revelation of Moshiach ben Yosef, and all that would entail resurrection from the dead. All that would entail the redemption for all humanity. But we've got to obliterate Amalek. We have got to do that. Right, this 368 is also opposite. Not only is it opposite Yosef, it's opposite a revelation of the name YHVH, because we've got this, what's called the regressive spelling, where we start off with the Yud filled out, and then we go to the Yud-He filled out. And this is at the highest level, where the He is filled with a Yud, and the Vav is filled with a Yud. And then we've got the Yud-He-Vav, and then Yud-He-Vav-He. And because we're going from small to big, like from starting just with the Yud, and ending with a Yod-He-Vav-He, it's called regressive, and that's according to Arizal. So we've got the regular and ordinal of that, which are the same because it's only all the letters are under 10, a 10 and under, aren't there? So they would be the same ordinal and regular. That comes to 368, which is exactly the same of Amalek. Amalek is not just trying to suppress Moshiach ben Yosef. By suppressing Moshiach ben Yosef, he's actually suppressing a revelation of the name YHVH. And then we've got this also. So what overcomes that then? Mashiach, my anointed. Okay, Moshiach 368 plus 62 ordinal comes to 430. 430 is also linked up here. So not only is it linked to these concepts, it's also linked back up to here, the 430 up there. And 430 is also shekel, which is, if you look here, look, okay, it's Shem L'choshech, the initial letters, Kof, Shin, Lamed, rearranged to spell shekel. Okay, Yosef was sold into slavery, he will need to be bought back. Okay. And I know that there are Orthodox Jewish people that are trying to arrange what's called a Pidyon Nefesh. Ariel Cohen Olaro is trying to organise a Pidyon Nefesh to redeem the soul of Yosef, Yeshua, Moshiach, back from the Edomite slavery into which he's sold. But he needs redeeming back. He has been kidnapped by the other side, and he needs to be brought back. He's not an Edomite or an Ishmaelite. He's a Hebrew, and he's not Erev Rav either. He needs to be redeemed from them because they are the ones that have cursed him and diminished him. Right, blessed is the Lord forever. That's Baruch Adonai Le'olam. That's 430. Okay, so link to all this. And then we've got Samuel, that comes to 430. Okay, the shield of Saul, Mogen Shaul, also 430. Nefesh, soul as in Pidyon Nefesh, redemption of the soul, that comes to 430. 43 times 10, which is Esav is 43, the ordinal of Esav is 43. So that's all connected. We need to transform Esav into Shalom, and that vessel will be the vessel that fills up full of the light of the name YHVH. Tohu v'bohu, without form and void, or chaos and utter confusion, 430. So this is what Amalek causes, doesn't it? And all the forces of darkness, the wanting, the Erev Rav are wanting to keep us in a state of chaos and utter confusion. And when you have suffered evil, you are in a state of chaos and utter confusion. You are not confident and certain of who you are. You are subject to those forces of chaos and utter confusion and worthlessness and self-pity and depression and sadness and aggression and hopelessness and disappointment and everything else. Total utter chaos and confusion. You're all over the map, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, everywhere. And even when you've been woken up to the truth about Yeshua being the Moshiach and you've experienced salvation, you can still be all over the map with a lot of confusion and chaos, because those forces of darkness take some subduing. Okay? It's only through a total revelation of the name YHVH is it possible to subdue this chaos and this form of void, but the forces of the Erev Rav are continually trying to draw the earth back into a state of formlessness and void, tohu vabohu, and it's just the same in our life. The forces of darkness are continually trying to drag us into a place of utter chaos and confusion, and we've got to stand firm. Get our minds attached to true reality, the name YHVH, and nothing else beside him. The righteous is the foundation of the world, Zedek Olam Yesod. Moshiach ben Yosef is the foundation of the world. 430. YHVH, the name in full, plus Moshiach, 358. So this is the highest revelation of the name YHVH when it's filled out with Yods up here. This would come to 72. Okay, so you've got Yod, which is 20, 15, 22, and 15, and that comes to 72. Okay, and then Moshiach, add Moshiach to it, and it comes to 430. Yeshua, 386, plus dam, blood. The blood of it is spilled. And we will get to it in the next slide where he's talking about, this is my blood spilled for many. So that together comes to 430. He paid the price for us. He paid the price for us. We were trapped and totally bound and subject and servants and slaves to the other side. Okay, there's a reason for all this. The ultimate reason is to reveal the true power of the name YHVH. These forces of evil cannot overwhelm the truth of the name YHVH. And each and every one of us should prove that. Now, Yeshua was the soul that came to us, or through Yeshua, the soul of Moshiach ben Yosef, YHVH was able to reach us in that place, grab a hold of us and bring us slowly out of our state of filth and depravity and exile into the light of his name. Okay, Yeshua plus YHVH spelled out with He when it equals 14. So the He, the letter He, if you look at the letter He, where is it up here? It can be split into a Dalet and a Yod, which comes to 14. That's what the sages say. It can be split into a Yod and a Dalet. So when YHVH is spelled out where the He is equal 14, the numerical value for YHVH then is 44. Because you've got Yod 10, He 14, Vav 4, and the final He 14. Add them all together, it comes to 44. So 386, which is Yeshua, plus that particular spelling out of YHVH, which is exactly the same as blood, dam, comes to 430. Tree of the field, this also comes to 181. Man is a tree of a field, that's what it says. And Has-Sodeh is exactly the same as Shaddai. Okay, and Shaddai is related to Metatron. And it's also related to El Shaddai. So the concept of the footsteps of Moshiach, because El Shaddai spelled out come to 999, which is the footsteps of Moshiach ben Yosef. So there's a lot connected. We've got this Metatronic state, which is connected to the concept of the field. Eitz HaSodeh is tree of the field. But the rabbis say that man is a tree of the field because the word before that is man. So Eitz HaAdam. I did a whole analysis of this, very, very fascinating stuff. But that comes to 543, the regular and the ordinal. Look at what the regular is, 474, which is Da'ath, knowledge. Okay, so we got a link to the concept of the tree of knowledge. Okay, we want to transform the experience that we have experienced out in the field. We want to transform that into a revelation of the name YHVH. There's all kinds of mystical things. I ain't got time to go over those now, but there's lots of mystery and deep Kabbalistic concepts involved with the concept of man being a tree of the field, or this concept of the tree of the field. But it's 3 times 181, so we can see it's all linked to this. We have to experience for ourselves the power of the name YHVH in every aspect of our life. And our life is likened to being in the field. Okay? There's two types of field. There's the field of the Holy Shekinah, but there's also the field of Esau that Esau represents, and this is almost the field of exile. Okay, and Yosef was sent to the field, and his father, because he sent him out to the field to check on his brothers, he actually taught him some particular Torah that would help him survive, and it was the Torah of the cow with the broken neck. If you find a dead body and you don't know who's committed the murder or whatever, you've got this whole procedure involved in measuring from the deceased body to all the surrounding villages and which one's the nearest, and then they've got to make a declaration that they fed this person and that they escorted this person and that they, shared Torah with them and things like that. And it's all related to Yosef being sent out to the field, and the fact that Yaakov had taught him, this is all midrashic, taught him about this, the laws of the Arufa, Arufa, the cow with the broken neck. And what happens is you've got to break a neck to atone for the blood that's spilt in this, that they don't know who spilt the blood. So you've got to break the neck of a cow that's not had a yoke upon her neck. And this was what was taught to Yosef by his father when he was sent out in the fields to his brother. But this Torah fortunately saved his life. And whenever the Jews are going into a place of exile, like having to deal with Edomites and stuff like that, they're taught about this is according to Midrash, they are taught about the Egla Arufa, the cow with the broken neck, and all the laws pertaining to a dead body found in the field, because the field can be dangerous. The field of Esav and this exiled reality is a very dangerous place. There's lots of very, very savage demonic forces that prevail. And we've got to be very aware of those forces. A lot of, like I say, these men that are like an ox that gore is because their flesh is dominating over their soul, and because they've got powerful fleshly lusts, like an Esav represents the flesh, the body. That's what dominates. It's a dangerous place to live. It's a dangerous place to be for your soul in that environment where everybody's flesh is dominating over their soul, and they're not showing mercy and compassion and kindness. Instead, they're just satisfying the lusts, and you're just seen as garbage. And we've got to detach ourselves from that reality and overcome it as well. It's a dangerous place. It was dangerous for Yosef. He ended up sold into Egypt. Okay, but he gave a sign on the way back. If you look in the Torah, it was the carriages that he sent to his father to pick him up from Canaan and bring him back to Egypt, called Aglot, and there was reference to the Eglah, the cow. The carriages that he sent were a coded message to his father to tell him, I never forgot the Torah that you taught me when you sent me into the field. It stayed with me and remained with me and sustained me. Okay, so that's what sustained him. And Yosef, in a way, is sustained despite him being given over to the forces of the other side, despite him being given subject to Edomite, Greco-Roman enslavement. The power of the Torah that Yaakov taught him is what's sustaining him. And it's all connected to the concept of the field. There's loads and loads. I mean, you could talk for a long time about that just alone, but that's just one point. It's all connected. It's all glorious. It's all wonderful. It's all things that we need to know. Make all these connections we need to make. For there is yet a vision, that's 181 and 82 ordinarily, which is Moshiach ben David. The vision is what? The vision is all this, isn't it? That the bones come alive, Amalek's defeated, Yosef, Od Yosef Chai. That's the vision. That's the vision. Okay, it's all wonderful, it's all glorious, but there's work involved. Just as Yosef, he had to overcome all the forces of Pharaoh and bring Pharaoh around to a place where even Pharaoh ultimately ended up serving the will of YHVH by bringing his family and making him safe during the time of the exile into Egypt and stuff like that, preparing them for that. There's all kinds of things that all kinds of glorious things anyway. Right, take for yourself Yeshua the son of Nun. We've already looked at that, haven't we? That we're on the last one. Just to point out that Moshiach ben Yosef 566 plus Yosef 156 comes to 722, and that times 4, I think. It looks like it would be 4 times that. Divided by 4. No, just wait a minute. 2888 divided by 4. Yeah, 722. So that's 4 times this. So as we can see, take for yourself Yeshua ben Nun is an appellation for Moshiach ben Yosef. So we can also see that through all these connections, can't we? Okay. And we know that there's a unity between Yeshua and Moshiach. Yeshua and Moshe. There's got to be that same unity between Moshiach ben Yosef and Moshe. Okay, we've already gone through that with the sun and before the moon. Went through that last time. And face to face, we've already gone through that. And Yeshua, ordinarily filled. So if we take the 117, that's when Yeshua is filled where the Vav is filled, Vav Vav. That's when Yeshua is filled when the Vav is Vav Yod Vav. And that's Yeshua filled when the Vav is filled with the Yod, Vav Yod Vav. Add them all together, comes to 362. Okay. Which is utterly and absolutely glorious. I think there was another 127 up here, or it might have been on the other page. But that 127, when I pointed out, would be a filling out of Yeshua with the Yud in the Vav. That's where it was. What else have we got? Great is your faithfulness. We've already gone through that. And then also, for dogs have surrounded me, a band of evildoers have encompassed me like a lion, my hands and feet. That comes to an ordinal of 432. This is all about Moshiach ben Yosef, Yeshua. Okay, and it's all connected to this, and it's connected to the fact that he's suffering so that ultimately there will be an end to the darkness, including the end to his suffering. Okay, most importantly, right, let's go and have a look at this from Talmud then. So I've already mentioned about Yosef not drinking wine. Now let's look at the Talmud, which mentions it. It says, and Rabbi Malai said in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak from Migdal, from the day that Yosef took leave from his brothers, he did not sample a taste of wine, as it is written, they shall be on the head of Yosef, and on the crown of the head of he who has separated Nazir from his brothers. The language of the verse alludes to the fact that Yosef conducted himself like a Nazarite, because it's a Nazir. A Nazir is one who's a Nazarite and abstained from wine. Shabbat 139a. So we've already gone through that, haven't we? But we will looking at another number. We've had a look at that, and we've had a look at another number. But this is the 4,989. Right? He placed governors in Edom. Throughout all of Edom, he placed governors. That as a mispah gadol, also of. Have I made a mistake there? Oh, I might have done. Where is it? The connection. All right. I've just highlighted the wrong word. I was thinking, I hope I haven't made a connection. So I've highlighted this by mistake, and I should have highlighted this word, the mispah gadol. So 4,596. Let me go change it because I don't like it to look like that. Okay, so now we're talking. So this has got the exact same gematria as this. Why? Because Yosef is suffering with us in exile in order to subdue these powerful forces, Edomite forces, okay, Vesav, in order to bring them to a place of shalom. Because we'll read the actual verse that's talking about, and it's talking about King David. He placed governors in Edom. Throughout all of Edom he placed governors, and then he had shalom. We'll get to the actual verse. Okay, but if we add these two together from here, the mispagadol plus the ordinal mispagadol, we get 4,935, which is 5 times 987. 987, I'll just read this out for you. The way to the king, YHVH, is to cause exile for a greater good, for peace between body and soul, and the reign of King David, which represents the oneness and absolute sovereignty of YHVH. There's purpose in everything. Yosef is not suffering exile in vain. Peace for a glorious, glorious, glorious good. You know, it's to defeat these evil influences and bring them to the side of holy. And souls like me, to bring souls like me that have been totally and utterly exposed to the forces of the other side and dominated totally and completely by them, to show that evil has no dominion whatsoever over the name YHVH, that he reigns supreme. And even though this evil can reign for a certain time, its reign is not forever. When YHVH desires that soul be redeemed, that soul is redeemed in full. Okay? And how is that possible? It's connected to a unity between Moshiach and Yeshua. That's Moshiach filled out and Yeshua filled out. Add them together, 987, which is connected to this. And it's the power of Moshiach and Yeshua together that's subduing these forces and putting governors in Edom in order to control them, so that there is peace in the kingdom of David. And then we've got this: a king reigned over the children of Israel. It's actually, this is from Genesis 36:31, which is talking about all the kings of Edom reigning, the 8 kings of Edom reigning before, the word before this, before a king reigned over the children of Israel. We can ignore the bit before, because once we've subdued Edom and put governors in place, then a king reigned over the children of Israel. Okay, we can read it like that. That comes to 813, which is very significant. 813 is the regular of the verse, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Okay. With the ordinal, it comes to 987. And then this is the wine preserved in the grapes. So we're talking about this. This is the wine that's preserved in the grapes from Moshiach, from the 6 days Yamim, something like that. Yeshesheth Yamin Bereshith, from the 6 days of creation. And those words, from the 6 days of creation, the initial letters can be rearranged for the initial letters of Moshiach ben Yosef. So it's all glorious and it's all connected. Now, this is the verse that was talking about. And he placed governors in Edom. Throughout all of Edom he placed governors, and all of Edom became servants to David. And the Lord saved David wherever he went. So obviously this is it's a glorious thing. You know, we cannot leave our bodies, which are represented by Edom, to their own devices, because if we do, there'll be evil. We've got to subdue them. Who ultimately subdues them? David. And all of Edom became servants to David, and the Lord saved David wherever he went. And it's just a wonderful. There's all kinds. I've done an analysis on this before. There's all kinds of indications there. So going back to the concept of him not tasting the wine, because his wine is preserved in the grapes from the 6 days of creation. That's what's written in Talmud. It says, "Then he said to them, 'This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many,'" including me. "Truly I tell you, I will no longer drink the fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it anew in the kingdom of God." And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. It's just so utterly glorious. And then just this is taken from an article that I read on Torah.org. It says, "This notion of Yosef as an embodiment of unity is further supported from a statement in the Talmud Bavli, Tractate Shabbos 139a. Miyom she mipresh Yosef me'echav lo ta'am yain." From the day that Yosef separated from his brothers and he did not taste a drop of wine, the Ben Ish Chai, Rav Chaim Yosef of Baghdad, in his Sefer Ben Yehoyada, offered several reasons for Yosef's avoidance of wine. In an intriguing analysis, he suggested that Yosef was constantly engaged in prayer, beseeching Hashem not to harm his brothers for their sin of selling him into servitude, since one who is inebriate is not permitted to pray. And since his prayer was constant, min hayom ve halayla, from day and night, he practiced total abstinence from wine. My voice is going now. I've talked a lot. Right. The reason why I've talked a lot is because this is one big teaching. I hope you managed to get through it. It's glorious. It's so much. You know, when I listen to my teachings over again, because I always put them on YouTube and I always listen to them again myself, and it always inspires. It always inspires further thoughts and further processes and more connections, and it's wonderful. And if I didn't listen to myself, I know it sounds a little bit strange listening to myself, but because sometimes I'm just inspired as I'm going along, and when I listen to myself, I think, oh yeah, and I get another connection. I hope you've made it to the end of this teaching. I know it's a very long teaching. There's a reason why it's very long. It's because we need this amount of information and knowledge of YHVH in order to overcome those forces of darkness that I speak about. We have got to fill ourselves like an overflowing cup with light and life, because we are subject to such powerful other forces that we need an opposite equal counterpart to that. So these teachings, and I put them all together because I know for a fact if I put 3 teachings on, part 1, part 2, part 3, nobody watches part 3, part 2, and you know, I'm lucky if I get people to watch part 1. So I've just started to put them all together, and I'll put chapters on instead, hopefully in the comments. So I really hope you've gained a lot from it. But with that, I will say shalom.